Oh, sorry. I didn't mean. Yugao chuckled. It's alright. I've been used to having to stay up for a long time. I've also grown used to being a pillow. I believe my destiny has led me to this moment, she said, pointing to the other side of her shoulder. Yura looked over and found a smile coming across her face when she saw Yuri sitting there, equally as passed out as she had been. On the other side of the benches, Conan sat silently. The two acknowledged each other with pleasant nods before Yura turned back to the operating room. Joy filled her body when she saw the red light had turned green. They're done? She asked. Yugao frowned. The light's been green for the last few minutes, but no one's come out. I only woke you up because I saw one of the surgeons open the door before they were called back inside. I don't know what they're doing in there, the former Anbu agent said while she slowly started to wake Yuri up. The Sanbi Jinchuriki groaned until she woke up as well. The four continued to wait before they saw Tsunade walk through the door. Joy quickly turned to worry when they watched even her stumble for a moment. Her forehead and chest were covered with sweat. Her eyes were bloodshot and her nose was marked by dried blood. The Hokage quickly noticed those waiting for her and exhaled slowly. How long have you four been out here? She asked. Almost since you started, Yura answered. Tsunade glanced at her before she looked at Yugao, Yuri, and Conan. Naturally, she eyed the former Akatsuki member warily, but at this point, she was much too tired to care. Hell, she was too tired to even stand at the moment. The only thing that kept her going was the adrenaline and the soldier pills. Those hadn't lasted for too long. How is he? Yuri asked, concern dripping off her lips like water. Yugao was more restrained in her emotions, but it was clear that she too was eager for the news. After all the losses the shinobi force had endured a day ago, the last thing anyone needed was to lose their best shot of returning to their world, if there was anything left of it. Tsunade opened and closed her mouth. The Godime pinched the bridge of her nose and the others feared the worst, but she eased their concerns with her next words. I've never been much for religion, or the gods, but I think we can thank Kami, or the shinigami that he's alive, she said. Yura placed her hands over her mouth in shock before she wept for her lover. She fell to her knees in gratitude to the shinigami for his great mercies toward the Uzumaki family. She offered a brief, yet sincere prayer to him before she stood back up. Yuri breathed a sigh of relief, touching her chest from the stress that was threatening to overwhelm her. Truth be told, she still didn't feel like she earned the right to be here, but Conan had guilt-tripped her a little. The paper wielder commented how sad Naruto might be if his lover wouldn't even visit him, thus making his recovery that much harder. So, Yuri went if only to help her lover feel better. She didn't know if she was the right person for it, but Naruto always had a way of making her feel better. Maybe the same would be true for her. Conan and Yugao smiled, but the joy of the group was slowly brought down when Tsunade spoke again. However, he's very weak at the moment. We almost lost 4 or 5 times. Despite that, his body is currently repairing itself at an almost astonishing rate. In fact, it's repairing faster than what should be capable of most Jinchuriki. I've had to heal the brat of some very severe injuries during his career, but this baffles even me. If he was an average person, I'd be calling for him to retire. If he were talented, it'd take him at least 5 months. I can only call it a godly miracle that he'll be up and running in about a week, she spoke. A week? Yura questioned. After all of that fighting that he and Kushina had endured, would he be capable of doing it again a week from now? That should be impossible, Yugao commented. Tsunade leaned against the wall. Trust me, it freaked out me and the other doctors as well. Whatever happened to him, it's otherworldly, I'll say that much. However, I think this will be a blessing for us. I hate to put Naruto in a position like that again, but we're gonna need him if we have any chance of beating that guy, the Godime said, keeping a rather important matter to herself. In fact, they needed Naruto up more than anyone else knew. At this point, this had to be the gods' work because realistically, it was impossible otherwise. Can we see him? Yura asked. Though sympathetic, Tsunade shook her head. At this moment, I'm afraid not. We will see where he is tomorrow and I will have someone inform all of you. In any other circumstance, I would agree, but things are very delicate right now. Please just wait a little longer, she replied, bowing her head to the group present. Yura and Yuri balled their fists, but the former just nodded hopelessly. Well, he was alive. At this moment, that was all they wanted. Thank you. No, thank you for all your hard work, Tsunade-san. We'll await your word. We'll also leave you and the rest of the doctors to take a well-deserved rest, she said, consoling her sister. The Uzumaki sisters led themselves away. Now that Naruto was confirmed, they'd check in on Kushina. Given that Naruto had taken a while, they checked on Kushina once before, but she was also in an operating room headed by Shizune. Tsunade watched them go while Yugao bowed. I will go inform the rest of the team, Hokage-sama. Will you have any more need of me? Yugao asked. The Godime exhaled slowly. Yes, inform Makoto that I'll want the both of you at the Hokage mansion in about a day or two. That'll be all, she said. Yugao nodded and walked off, which left Konan with the Hokage. And are you going to be a concern for us? The Godime asked with narrowed eyes when she laid them on Konan. The paper wielder frowned before she closed her eyes. I cannot say for the rest as I am no longer affiliated with them, but I'm sure I'll be able to meet with them without being attacked. I believe this will work out for all of us since I've acquired some recent information. I hope it will put an end to this meaningless death that we've caused upon our world. Now, I wonder what would have happened if we had the rest of the Biju and their Jinchuriki with us. Have a good day, Konan responded, offering a bow before she left as well. Tsunade watched her go while the surgeons started walking out of the operating room, each more exhausted than the last. She watched them go, thanking each of them. That said, they still weren't done. Now that Naruto was taken care of, they had to work on the other patients. After that, they would be allowed some sort of rest. The Godime certainly needed it. In the meantime, Yugao watched Yuri and Yura disappear down another hallway. She exited the hospital, her breath already showing in the chilling air. The snow continued to fall almost despairingly, a constant and brutal reminder to all those who sat under its cold touch of what they lost. Yugao waved to one of her friends before she headed out. After a long while, the former Anbu agent found herself at the Uchiha compound. When she'd walked through the streets, she always wondered if this was the closest the nations had gotten to world peace when she saw so many different shinobi congregating around the snowy roads. Panting, she entered and saw a number of Suna shinobi situated through their homes. Yugao wondered how the deceased Uchiha members, Kami bless their souls, would feel about something like this. Still, she continued onward. Traveling far, Yugao found Yuna handing out Suna's portion of the food. Yuna-san, I see you're busy, Yugao said. The black-haired Uchiha turned to Yugao and nodded. Yes, it's been a little hard, but it's necessary. What can I do for you, Yugao-san? She asked, not in a particularly cheerful mood. Then again, the Uchiha weren't the most expressive anyway. Additionally, there wasn't much to be cheerful about these days. Naruto's made it out of the operation. They say he'll live. I wanted to spread the news. I figured we all deserve something good for our lives at the moment. I also had something else to tell Makoto-san, Yugao said. The frown on Yuna's face swiftly flew upwards at the news. Yeah, that's some good news. Come on, Sasuke and Makoto-sama are inside. I'll go get Itachi, wherever he's hiding, she replied. Yugao thanked her and entered the main Uchiha household. Luckily for her, neither Uchiha was hard to find. A doctor had left their living room with Makoto tending to her son. Yugao entered the room. Sasuke, stop squirming. You're only gonna make this harder, Makoto replied. I can do it myself. He returned with a growl. That only got a chuckle out of Makoto until both spotted Yugao. Welcoming her inside, Yugao swiftly took a seat. I'm glad to see the hate of doctors is the same no matter what clan you're from, she replied, which got a nod from Makoto. Some more than others, the mother of the Uchiha clan heir replied while she continued to inspect her son. He grumbled beneath her touch, but a stern look from her was enough to make him grit his teeth and bear it for this time. Deciding to withhold her news until Yuna and Itachi arrived, Yugao passed the time by making small talk with her teammates. Thankfully, the two Uchiha arrived soon enough with Itachi greeting her. Never did Yugao think she'd ever be on such pleasant terms with a former agent as well. She'd worked with Itachi many times in their Anbu career, but when he turned traitor, admittedly at the Third Order, she wondered if they might ever work together again. Anyway, I didn't wish to stay for too long. I merely wanted to let you all know that Naruto's operation was a success, she stated. As Yuna already knew, she glanced at the others. Sasuke would deny it to death, but the relief he felt was unlike any that he'd ever had before. The only thing that came close to something like that was when Sasuke woke up to a successful mission back in Wave. Itachi almost smiled, clearly just as relieved as the rest of his family. And Kushina? Makoto inquired. Don't mistake her, she was just as relieved as anybody that her son's best friend was alive. Hell, 3 of the 4 Uchiha in this room obviously knew that Naruto was their master since he'd revived them. Word of his return and defeat had sent ripples throughout the entire village. Many started to lose hope, fearing they'd never get to go home if even he couldn't take down the foe that stood before them. Many thought him dead and that they soon would follow, either by the cold or the god. In fact, some of them were wondering if praying to Jashin was better than nothing. Makoto was elated to her best friend's son was alive, but she was equally worried for Kushina. She'd taken a beating by Jashin as well. What kind of friend would she be if she wouldn't worry about her friend? Still, if Naruto somehow survived, then that had to provide something for Kushina, right? Shizune-san's working on her with another group of surgeons. It helps that we were quick in getting her medical attention when she went down first. Still, she should be back on her feet as well because the Hokage claimed that Naruto's recovering faster than what should be normal for even Jinchuriki. It's assumed that he'll be fully recovered in about a week, Yugao replied, which stumped all 4 of the Uchiha. A week? Isn't that too early? Yuna asked. Yes, it is. In fact, it's nothing short of a divine miracle. We're fairly short on those these days. I just wanted to bring a little hope to all of us. No one's feeling up for it these days. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have one more person to tell, Yugao explained as she finished the drink she was given and stood up. Oh, and Makoto-san, you and I were requested by Lady Tsunade to appear at the Hokage mansion tomorrow, Yugao spoke, which got a stir from the mother of Sasuke and Itachi. The others glanced at her, watching her expression turn professional in an instant. Did she say what for? Makoto questioned. Unfortunately, her teammate shook her head and sighed. She was too tired. No doubt Naruto's operation took a lot out of her. She's going to rest for a little while. A lot of the medics are burning through the village's supply of soldier pills trying to keep as many people alive as they can. This snow and ice also aren't helping either, Yugao answered, her gaze turning to the window. The 4 Uchiha followed her gaze. The snow continued outside, increasing in speed in ways they thought impossible. Then there were those 2 giant moon-like planets that seemed closer to the dimension they were in than even in their own world. Perhaps it was those that were causing the weather to go so far out of control, but what could they say? It wasn't like this was their planet that they were on. How could they predict the weather of a place like this? Makoto hummed. I see. Very well, I'll be there. Thank you, Yugao. Can we get you anything else before you leave? She asked. Yugao shook her head. No, thank you. I'll go inform Kakashi. Then, I'll be returning to Kushina's side, the purple-haired woman said. She then stood up and walked out the door, waving goodbye to her 2 teammates and the rest of their family. Once Yugao left, Yuna leaned back with a sigh. She noticed her lover contemplating something heavy. You've got that look on your face like you're thinking something reckless, Sasuke. What are you planning in that head of yours? Yuna asked. Makoto and Itachi looked at the youngest of the Uchiha. They saw the frown continuing to grow across his face. It can't stay like this. We need more power. Throughout my career, there's been a lot of times that I've felt helpless. In my quest for power to avenge our clan, I in turn met power so strong I couldn't even breathe. There was first Itachi, then there was Kakashi. After them was Zabuza, Orochimaru, Naruto, Yuri, and then, that guy, Jashin. Had I been more powerful, I probably could have kept more of us alive. The entire Hyuga clan got wiped out. When I think that could have happened to any of you, I can't sleep, Sasuke said. He grabbed Yuna's hand and kissed it slowly. She looked at him, taken aback by his intense words. When Sasuke let down his hand, Makoto shivered when his gaze turned to her. He looked at her with such strong conviction, reminding her of their dance months ago. I was powerless to protect my family before. The Dobi brought you all back to me, I'll be damned if I waste his efforts and lose you all a second time. Sasuke replied, casting his eyes on Itachi next. And how do you plan on doing that? Itachi asked. Of course, the older sibling had an idea of where Sasuke was going with this. He'd actually been contemplating it himself, especially after his mother lost her eye while using the Izanagi to reverse the deaths of everyone. Recklessly, she'd even tried to use it to reverse the deaths of all those who died to Jashin, but it seemed that the god of slaughter had a much grander command over reality than what she did. How she was able to keep her eye in the end, he had no idea. Makoto shivered when she felt Sasuke grab her hand as well. His hand held hers with such gentle strength, but she was worried when she felt him shaking. "Itachi, switch eyes with me," Sasuke said. Yuna and Makoto froze, too stunned to speak. After some time, Yugao finally made it to Kakashi's apartment complex. She shook off some of the snow from her body. She breathed a stream of cold air from her lips before she made her way toward his door. Yugao remembered coming here a plethora of times to deliver her former captain news. Suddenly, from around the corner, Yugao quickly picked up on yelling. "Obito-kun, wait." Yugao watched the door to Kakashi's apartment blast open. Out came one of the Akatsuki members, Obito Uchiha. Yugao remembered him because Naruto had spoken about him. Kakashi had also spoken regarding him as well. Back when the young woman lost her lover, Hayate, she too visited the memorial stone with Kakashi. He spoke of Obito a lot. Yugao had been stunned when Obito was deemed alive. For him to join an organization like Akatsuki, his circumstances couldn't have been simple. Yugao watched Rin appear behind Obito. She grabbed his arm, but he quickly shoved her off. "Don't touch me. You think that just because you come back that I'll just forsake all the things I've seen. The anger I've felt. Don't pretend you care about me. Just stay away from me. This changes nothing," Obito replied angrily. Rin shivered when she saw the anger in her former teammate's eyes. It was an anger piled up with years of guilt, rage, and frustration, all of it coming down at once. "Obito-kun, please." Yugao watched as Obito rebuffed her efforts harshly. He spotted Yugao before he warped away using his Mangekyo Sharingan. The female Hinokan member watched Rin fall to the ground, distraught and crying. She seemed so stunned that she hadn't even taken notice of Yugao yet. Sometimes, bringing someone back doesn't solve all the problems. Instead, it just makes more, Yugao thought to herself until she saw Kakashi appear. "It's cold, Rin, come back inside," he said, his face just as disheartened as hers. "I never knew. All that time, he went through all of that for so long with no one to help him. And, all that time, I never knew how he felt," she replied. Kakashi squeezed her shoulder, unable to say anything that might make her feel better. If there was anyone with the skill for comforting someone, it definitely wasn't Kakashi. At least, he didn't think so. Finally, Kakashi turned his head and saw Yugao standing there. Sorry to interrupt. Should I come back later?" Yugao asked, not entirely sure what to do. She assumed the news about Naruto could wait until her friends collected themselves, but it looked like they could use some good news as well. "No, you can come in. I think we were just about finished," Kakashi said as he pulled Rin to her feet. He beckoned Yugao inside with them. She entered and spotted Rin taking a seat, deathly silent. Kakashi closed the door behind her and walked into his room. He offered her a seat, but she declined. He took a seat himself at his desk. The Jonin brushed a hand through his gray hair. Rin looked entirely lost, comatose even. "Would you like anything? All I've got is water around here, but I figure it's better to ask," Kakashi jested, the mirth never quite reaching his face. "No, thank you. Sasuke and Makoto tried to offer me the same thing. We have to start watching our food reserves until we head home. I just wanted to tell you that Tsunade-sama finished healing Naruto. Despite a few scares, he's alive. In fact, he'll be awake in about a week," Yugao claimed. Kakashi exhaled, rubbing his face in relief. Even Rin had a small smile on her face. Well, that was until they heard the last of Yugao's words. "A week?" Rin questioned. Yeah, Yugao probably should have seen that one coming. After following through with the same explanation that she gave to Sasuke and his family, Kakashi and Rin were left stumped. Well, that'll be good for the morale of the people, but the problem is what to do afterward. If I know Naruto, he gave everything he had. Our world was even destroyed in the process. If he couldn't even beat the enemy after that, what can be left? Even then, how do we train him? Not one has fought a god before today. In fact, we were the hindrance. We were like a game compared to them. What more can Naruto do that he hasn't done already?" Kakashi asked. Truthfully, Yugao had no answers to that question. If he doesn't know, we must help him find out. That's the only way we can return to the world we knew, Yugao answered. And Kushina-san? Rin asked, just the same as Makoto. Yugao explained the circumstances surrounding the lover of the Uzumaki clan as well. When she finally left, Kakashi and Rin felt even more tired than when she'd arrived. Unfortunately, there was nothing to grant them any more pleasant thoughts. The icy winds continued to howl while the massive snow-covered mountains loomed over the frozen village ominously. The former teammates looked at each other. What are we going to do, Kakashi? Rin asked. For once, the Jonin didn't have an answer to that question. Yura and Yuri watched as Kushina was pushed into Naruto's room. Shizune had finished treatment 5 hours ago. She commented that it was only that short since Kushina had been receiving aid from the medic corps almost all of last night. The two Uzumaki sisters frowned when they saw her form. She seemed so weak and brittle right now. It almost seemed hard to believe she'd been facing down a literal god. Despite their insistence, they weren't allowed to see both of them as ordained by Shizune. Listen, I understand you're worried, but they will need their rest. I am an authorized medic employed by the Uzumaki clan. I understand my duties concerning Naruto-kun and Kushina-sama. You have my word that I'll inform you as soon as there's any change, Shizune said. Yura and Yuri glanced at each other before the former sighed. She seemed to be doing that a lot today. Patting her sister's shoulder, she nodded. All right, thank you, Shizune-san, Yura said. Yuri nodded as well, crestfallen by the news. The two turned around and proceeded to leave. Shizune closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. Honestly, if there was one thing she didn't miss about this job, it was giving the patients bad news. The grief-torn faces, the sobs reverberating through the hallways, the pain of having tried your best yet still failing, Shizune did not miss those moments at all. Many had bad days, but the bad days for Medic Nin tended to stay with them the rest of their lives. Not even Tsunade, her former master, had a perfect track record. No one ever did. Shizune turned out the lights in Naruto and Kushina's room. She walked away, checking the medical information for them. It was a shame that none of the computers were working. Doing all of this by hand made the process of updating their information much slower than usual. Unfortunately, there was no rest for the weary. Shizune had to start working on the other patients as Tsunade asked her to. Meanwhile, Naruto and Kushina continued to rest in their darkened hospital room. Slowly, their bodies became consumed by white fire. The damage from the battle, the injuries from that dreaded night, were slowly being healed away. The shinigami loomed over them both. His hands were on their foreheads, filling them with spiritual power. It has been a long time since I've seen your face, Shinigami-sama. The shinigami turned his head and saw the regent appear before him. The god of death frowned but spoke not a word. The regent offered a large, grandiose bow. He then walked over to Naruto and held up the blade that housed Kagura. He placed the scabbard on Naruto's chest. Soon the two was enveloped in the white flames. The regent then backed away and chuckled. As the curtain falls, so too shall the destinies of all those who dance upon the realm of life. A comedy and a tragedy, two faces, one mask. Where shall we find ourselves when we step into the edge of infinity? The regent asked before he left as quickly as he appeared. The shinigami watched him go. He then looked back at the blade that had been handed down by the regent. Behave yourself. I shall not warn you again, he ordered. He didn't have to see the spirit of the woman within the blade to know that she'd relented to his commands. Meanwhile, in the depths of Naruto's mind, he found himself surrounded on all sides by darkness. Whether looking up, down, left, or right, there was only darkness as far as his eyes could see. Why? Why did it come to this? I lost. I gave everything I had and it wasn't even close to being enough. Yukimaru, Guren, Kamachi, Shion, my friends, they're gone and I couldn't even avenge them. What do I do now? I don't know if I can beat him. Not even that woman, Kagura, could help me. Not even all the souls I'd made a deal with could do it. What am I supposed to do? Naruto questioned as he leaned up. Then, he started laughing. He thought of all his battles, all his victories, and all of his losses. Why couldn't he just be allowed to be happy? Why did he always have to fight for it? Sometimes, Naruto was just tired of fighting. Hey, maybe I should have just let myself die back when Shin first came for me. I'm tired, Naruto said to himself. As the Kyuubi Jinchuriki contemplated his circumstances, the darkness around him became illuminated with white light. He sensed a myriad of presences behind him, all of them familiar. However, that didn't fill him with any sense of joy. Instead, it only made him angrier. Brooding doesn't suit you, brat. Naruto turned his head. He saw the familiar forms of Pakura, Suiran, Kimimaro, Gari, and Yahiko standing there before him. Aside from them, he also saw the kindred, Lamb and Wolf, Morio, and finally, the Kyuubi. He looked at them all and they looked back at him. The air around the shared space was palpable, each side waiting for the other to make their move. Finally, Naruto offered something between a chuckle and a scoff. Doesn't suit me, huh? I know what suits me is being alone. The blonde exclaimed, picking himself up off the ground. Where the hell were any of you? I called and fucking called. None of you answered. Please tell me if Shin ordered you not to help me, or maybe I did something wrong that you were all upset about. Please tell me so I can know why I faced a damn god all by myself when none of the people I trusted the most outside of my own family would help me. He roared. To his frustration, no one answered him. They just continued to hold their heads down, most specifically the humans of the group refused to look him in the eye. Naruto laughed. Wow, I guess I must be talking to the damn air since I'm not getting any responses. Is that it now? I'm not even worth enough to get an explanation. You know, I suppose it was too good to be true. My life was going too well for me. I was slowly starting to rebuild my family, Sasuke's family, righting all the damn wrongs the people of the elemental nations made. I wanted to good. I was trying to do good. And where does put me? My family's getting torn apart again, my mother nearly died again for my sake, and I couldn't even protect my home. All this along with people who act like I don't exist no matter how hard I scream or shout. He fired, his teeth seething as they listened. Clenching his fists, and gritting his teeth, Naruto finally exhaled. If you don't wanna fight by me anymore, then just say so. But don't claim to be there for me and abandon me when I need you the most. I've had enough experiences like that in my life. But you, Naruto said. Even without being addressed, Pakura knew that he was talking to her. How she wished she'd just kept her head down rather than face his gaze. Nevertheless, she probably owed him that much. When she looked at him, she saw the most heartbroken expression plastered on him. I'm not ashamed to say it. I trusted you the most. You were like the older sister I never got. I trusted you because I thought out of everyone you'd know what it was like to be betrayed, abandoned, and left to fend for yourself. You knew that and I let you in, that I knew it too. I thought you all knew what that was like. If there was anyone who'd stand by me, I thought it'd be you, he said, staring at Pakura. Despite her attempts to keep her face straight, the former Suna Kunoichi's stoic visage briefly broke. Naruto didn't miss that. If anything, that made him angrier. Before he could even speak, he staggered back. He then opened his mouth, but he swiftly closed it lest he say something he actually regretted. Instead, he angrily rubbed his hands through his hair. He then threw his hands up. Fine, don't talk. Ignore me just like everyone else. Actually, just leave me alone. You all seem to be good at that, he replied, growling at them all. Still, even with his anger, none of them said a word. Instead, they bowed their heads and left his presence until there was only him and the Kyuubi left. The two stayed in silence for a long time. It seemed strange. The fox had seen the blonde's back so many times, but never had it seemed so distant than before, especially for there being no bars between them. That said, there was more going on than even Naruto realized. Perhaps that didn't excuse their actions, but the fox would not be one to apologize. It simply wasn't in his nature. That said, perhaps you have forgotten one thing, Naruto. The world owes you nothing, and neither does anyone else. When the world offered you nothing, you rose above it to take it for yourself. You have not experienced what I and many others have gone through, the reality that things you love can be taken away from you and sometimes, there is nothing you can do about it. I'll say this much, but now you truly know how that Uchiha felt. For once, you're faced with something not even you'll be able to overcome. However, know that you were never alone, the Kyuubi expressed. Naruto said nothing. The Kyuubi gave a hard grunt, but he too slowly disappeared as well. As he desired, Naruto was left alone. He clenched his fists as the usual darkness started to overcome him. Standing by himself, Naruto clenched his hands and gritted his teeth even as tears fell down the side of his face. Yes, Naruto was aware that life wasn't fair. He and 9 others were prime examples of that. Yet, why did it have to be that way? Why did he have to keep fighting like this just to go some measure of happiness for himself? He just wanted to be happy. Wasn't that what most people wanted? So someone tell him. What was Naruto supposed to do to be happy? What was Uzumaki Naruto supposed to do to be granted the power to make sure no one took away what he loved? Ellipsis. There is one thing you should do. You must wake up to reality. The blonde stilled when he heard a chilling voice reverberate all around him. His eyes widened as he looked into the vast void of nothingness. Quickly, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's mindscape turned into a large battlefield, one rife with corpses and blood-stained weapons. Upon a large hill, Naruto stared upon the masses, the earth soaking in the blood. How many of these people did you think fought and died because they too wanted to be happy? To be accepted. To have their own fulfilled dreams. There have been many before you, and there shall be many after you. As a shinobi, one learns that nothing ever goes as planned in this accursed world. The longer you live, the more you realize that the only things that truly exist in this reality are merely pain, suffering, and futility. For that is what you signed up for when you donned that headbang, that cross for yourself to bear. In the end, you will come to find that peace is an illusion, one that mortals, for all their flaws, are incapable of attaining on their own, without special circumstances. Naruto's frown deepened when he heard the sounds of footsteps behind him. They came closer and closer until a man stood next to him. The instant Naruto saw him, the blonde knew that this man was powerful. There was pressure in his stance and wisdom in his gaze, one that not even the cage could match. Naruto didn't say it, but he already knew that this wasn't one of the good spirits. However, it wasn't the worst evil one either. In fact, this spirit was but a drop in what had taken him over in his fight against Jashin, but standing next to him on the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's own made him tremble. Another thing Naruto also noticed was that this man looked a lot like Sasuke in some areas. His black hair covered his backside and his eyes blazed with the red fury of the Sharingan. In fact, now that Naruto looked closer, he looked like the image of that statue in the valley where he'd fought Sasuke in. "Who are you?" the blonde asked. "I see that your history has deteriorated. Back when I was alive, there weren't many who did not fear my name. You may address me as Uchiha Madara, Shikyo-sama," the man responded, even though the Kyuubi Jinchuriki took notice that the man absolutely hated giving him any modicum of respect. He probably only did it because of Naruto's title as the Shinigami, especially since she hadn't even bothered to face the whiskered Uzumaki yet. That said, when his name was uttered, Naruto found himself chilled. There hadn't been a lot of stories regarding Uchiha Madara, but even Naruto knew him as one of the strongest Uchiha to ever exist upon the elemental nations. He'd been one of the central figures in creating Konoha alongside Senju Hashirama, the first Hokage. That had been one of the stories Naruto paid attention to. Anything regarding the Hokage had interested him greatly. It was claimed that the Shadaime Hokage personally killed him, which made him an enemy of the village. Though, Naruto was beginning to wonder what the word enemy even meant anymore. For once, Naruto decided to stay silent, observing this Uchiha who came next to him. "I can see it in your eyes. You think my words overly harsh. However, still you don't refute me. That's because you know somewhere within that I'm right. Why else would you throw the others away? They failed you, and you failed them," he said. Naruto cast a powerful glare at Madara. The Uchiha matched his gaze, though with some measure of respect. It wouldn't do well for him to be too rude to the Shinigami's summoner. "And how have I failed them?" he asked. "With all due respect, you are stupidly idealistic. How someone like you piqued the interest of the god of death baffles me. Why did you pick such weaklings if you wished for true power? You could have chosen anyone you wished, but you settled for fourth-rate shinobi and kunoichi. Idealists pursuing peace, or trash discarded to the wayside just as you were. Even the one you trusted the most, her death was used to keep the peace. Yet, it is that peace, that selfish intent to preserve it, will always bring out those who wish to destroy it. For there are many whose peace it is for nothing to remain except the quiet of a soulless world," Madara replied. He looked down at the battlefield. "You have great power, more power than I, more power than the Biju, and more power than any whoever will exist upon our planet. Yet, you use that power wastefully, selfishly pursuing your ideas of peace the way the world has thought you should. You do not make use of those summons fully, held back by your desire for peace that will only last a short while. The wrongs you've righted mean nothing in the grand scheme of things, Madara said. Naruto growled. They are not weaklings, he retorted. Despite how he felt for them currently, of the many things he'd spoken about them, being weak wasn't one of them. Madara closed his eyes. If they were strong, they wouldn't have let their master's castle become invaded so easily. Do not protect them, for they did not protect you. Instead, focus upon what you are. You have the sole power of a god at your disposal. You are the closest to the pinnacle that others could only dream of. Instead of this weak peace which will not last, you have the power to create real peace, true peace, everlasting peace. A world where everyone wins. A world where you will always win, he answered. Naruto scoffed. Yeah, right. I know you can't lie to me. So tell me what you think you're doing. What are you trying to sign me up for? The blonde asked. Madara chuckled. I am signing you up for the answer that you are craving so much. I will train you, and guide you. You've been taught by many, but you have not delved into the world as I have. I shall pull you in and grant you what you seek. I shall train you through and help you beat the god of slaughter. While I fought I saw things, many things, and I will teach you what they are. Trust me, or not, but with my help, you will regain what you've lost, the Uchiha replied, finally finishing his speech. Naruto didn't respond. Instead, he continued to look at the Uchiha with great uncertainty. While Madara, this man who was claimed to rival the Shinigami Hokage was strong, it wasn't like he was the strongest of the vile spirits that possessed him. Plus, Naruto knew there was a lot the spirit wasn't telling him. That said, he had no reason to doubt the honesty shown to him if only because he knew that Madara couldn't lie to him. Still, Naruto had a history of truths becoming lies. Is that the same thing you told to Uchiha Obito regarding Rin? Letting him hear what he wanted to hear. I might be pissed off, but I'm not stupid. What were you planning? He asked. This time, it was Madara's turn to frown. Does it matter anymore? You've changed the whole game plan. In another world, I'm sure we wouldn't be standing side by side like this. Maybe you'd even be one of the ones standing in my way. However, now that the Kyuubi's no longer composed of chakra, Project Tsuki no Mi is a failure. You can be proud that all the deaths which would have led the world to peace are now worthless. However, if you work with me, we can still make something better, even grander than what I'd imagined. Despite his current willingness, Obito wouldn't have seen the full plan through. You are greater than he was. Naruto hummed. You didn't answer my question, he accused. Madara sighed. At the cost of free will, I would have made a world of victors. Everyone achieves their own dreams and their own reality. Worlds where everyone wins and no one loses. Uzumaki Naruto gets to build his family, the greatest family known throughout the elemental nations. Obito Uchiha has no need to compete with Kakashi Hatake for the affection of the one he loves. Everyone wins in their own reality, he said. Despite his desire to outright dismiss the idea, Naruto could say he found some sort of warped appeal in it. Hell, right now he would like nothing more than for all of this to be a bad dream that he'd eventually wake up from. However, that would be the biggest slap in the face to Yukimaru, Gurren, and Kamachi. That'd be the greatest slap in the face to all those suffering under Jashin's control. That said, it'd be a waste of Naruto to neglect Madara's strength. It was also as he said, that plan couldn't come to pass anymore. If that's your idea of peace, then I guess I should just send your soul to Shin now, Naruto threatened, but Madara wasn't perturbed. You are welcome to, but you will not best him without me. Aside from Hashirama, there were very few who were my equal, the older Uchiha offered back, patience growing short. I see your attitude still hasn't changed, Madara. This time, another voice pierced through the conversation between the young Uzumaki patriarch and the famed former Uchiha clan head. The two turned their heads back, but only Madara scowled. Naruto, on the other hand, gained a look of clarity as a silver-haired man, his body covered with dark blue armor plating made stood across from the mountain they were on. His voice was deep and stern, such concepts as love and compassion removing themselves as necessary. Just from looking at him, Naruto knew who he was. He wouldn't have the right to have the dream of Hokage if he didn't even know of the ones who preceded him. Senju Tobirama, the brother of the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama. He was also supposed to be Tsunade's granduncle. Tobirama, Madara addressed as the man stepped to the other side of Naruto. The blonde didn't say anything until the Nadaime Hokage stared at the battlefield as well. You deserve credit, Uzumaki Naruto. You've kept Konoha and her citizens standing from what I've seen. For that, you are worthy of the title of Hokage. Nevertheless, you still failed. Even in the belly of the Shinigami, I sensed your mighty power. Had you been in control of yourself, you wouldn't have needed such reckless actions to try and achieve your goal. You're really a big fool. Perhaps even bigger a fool than my brother, Tobirama said. Naruto offered something between a scoff and a chuckle. As much as being compared to the Shadaime Hokage, even if it was insulting, thrilled him, this wasn't helping his mood. If you're going to talk down to me like everyone else, then you can get lost too, Naruto retorted, fed up with all of this. Luckily, Tobirama turned his gaze to him. I am not talking down to you. I am merely pointing out my observations. It was your pursuit of evil power that led you to this decision. Now, you would consider working with one who not only tried to overtake you but has also proven to be a threat to your home. If you feel I'm talking down to you, then perhaps it is you who feels that you need to be. Tobirama exclaimed harshly. Naruto opened his mouth, but Tobirama swiftly stopped him. You claimed that you wanted to be Hokage. Well, this is what a cage does, this is what a cage is. They willingly put the world and all people on their shoulders. Where others crack and break, they endure the fire and gleam like gold. You asked why you had to suffer like this, but that's not what you should be asking. You should be asking, what must I do to endure this suffering? By the Shinigami's mercy, I've viewed your life. You claim to have never given up and you won't start now. I will not give you answers, for that is not my duty, nor is it Madara's, Tobirama said, casting a harsh glare toward the Uchiha. The only thing that matters is what you wish to do. However, whatever you decide, you must endure that choice. This is the hand you were dealt. You can either complain and blame, or you can settle your accounts and do what must be done to correct it. You are the only one who can make things right, and we are the tools designed to help you do it. Think, what is it you want to do? Tobirama asked. Naruto looked at the Nadaime Hokage for a long while. He then glanced at Madara. He didn't speak either. Instead, the two ancient shinobi just looked at him. They always looked at him. People always looked to him for answers. That said, Tobirama did make a point. Naruto had done enough crying in his life. He'd also done enough blaming. Of course, that didn't make him feel any better about his summons who'd left him out to dry, but they did, and nothing was going to fix that. It was the hand he was dealt. Plus, Naruto couldn't afford to not do something. Yukimaru, Gurren, and Komachi were waiting for him to right these wrongs. Hiyashi, one of his best friends, Neji, Hinata, and the rest of the Hyuga clan, all of them were waiting as well. Naruto stepped forward and stared down at the battlefield. Before he turned around, he, Madara, and Tobirama heard another set of footsteps. The clacking of heels. The blonde turned his head and saw Kagura appear before the three of them. Her pupilless eyes glared at him. She stood with great poise and stature, power radiating off her body. It was so great that even Madara and Tobirama seemed wary of her. I'm gonna do something stupid, Naruto said, a great frown moving across his face. Makoto splashed water from a bucket on her face. She grabbed her Hinoken scarf and wrapped it around her neck. She was very tired. After Sasuke's statement, there had been a lot of back and forth between Makoto, her sons, and Yuna. In the end, there was no agreed upon way to go about the situation. To that end, they'd all gone to bed without resolving anything. Sasuke, Makoto thought as she looked at herself in her broken mirror. To be honest, the Uchiha matriarch wondered if she was going crazy. She looked at her eye patch and sighed. Times like this, Makoto might say she was a little jealous of Kushina. It'd be nice to have someone to warm a bed again, especially after her husband. A wistful sigh, she touched her hands, the phantom presence of her son's embrace still being felt by her. I must be crazy, Makoto thought. She grabbed her sword and strapped it to her back. She then pulled up her mask, covering her mouth. Leaving her room and heading for the front of her house, her steps were very quiet. She then made it to the front door. The cruel touch of the cold was already upon her when she opened the door. Breathing out, she entered the kingdom of frost and closed the door. The dash toward the Hokage mansion was something of a blur to her. The streets were lined with familiar and unfamiliar shinobi. No one seemed too keen on speaking to anyone else, hundreds of years of frustration compounding upon each other. When Makoto arrived at the Hokage mansion, she entered through the secret passageway beneath the building and swiftly joined up with her teammate, Yugao. "Good morning, Makoto-san," the younger of the two said, a smile on her face. "Is it morning? I haven't been able to tell with the absence of the sun," the Uchiha matriarch replied, wide awake now. Apparently, rushing through the cold, freezing wind had done wonders for waking her up. Yugao chuckled as the two continued to walk down the long corridor. After a while, they entered the meeting room that would be used for the Cage Summit. Upon entering, they quickly saw that they weren't alone. The older sister of the Cage was present as well, along with Ao of Kurigakure, Darui, and Karui from Kumogakure, and 2 random Iwagakure shinobi. Temari had been having a very bad time, especially after mourning the loss of Kankuro. Unashamedly, she'd spent a lot of time at Shikamaru's house, the loss bringing them together. She would have been there to grieve with Gaara, but her younger brother had locked himself in his room. It had been nice soul-cracking when she heard his bitter sobs. That led Temari to her meeting up with Shikamaru, the boy who pissed her off like no other. When she met him, he too was a mangled mess. He sat in his room with an almost numb look on his face, a cigarette pushing out the corner of his lips. His eyes were bloodshot from crying over the loss of his friends, Choji, Ino, and their fathers. The two stayed in their grief together all the way through the night, the passion only numbing them a little bit. She hadn't been able to go to sleep. Visions of Kankuro's death left her with vivid nightmares. The same could be said for Karui. Darui glanced at her and saw her persistence to keep her eyes up. Truth be told, he hadn't wanted to bring her here, but she all but violently volunteered. Omoi hadn't been seen anywhere and no Kumo shinobi was feeling up to stuff. It was only Karui, and Darui knew the reason why from the way she trembled, clenching his clothes. It was all about Samui and Atsui. Konoha, late as usual, Karui grumbled before Darui placed a hand on her shoulder. She shrugged him off and folded her arms with a scowl. Neither Yugao nor Makoto paid her much mind. Instead, they stood on their side of the room with no one speaking to anyone else. The air in the meeting room was palpable, with the guards of the 5 nations glancing at each other. Ao gave Makoto a long look. She too spared him a look for longer than normal. Yugao wondered if there was some sort of history between the two shinobi but didn't bother asking about it. The group of guards waited in the room for about 30 minutes, each one showing signs of exhaustion before the doors opened. As best they could, everyone straightened up when the 4 Cage and Kuretsuchi came through the door. By the vote of the remaining Iwagakure people, Kuretsuchi had been made the temporary Tsuchikage in honor of her grandfather, something she didn't think she was ready for. At the moment, Kuretsuchi was a fucking mess just like everyone else. She contemplated actually finding somewhere remote and letting the cold claim her. Perhaps she'd enjoy the sweet warmth of her grandfather again, but she knew he'd only bash her head in if he left the people without a leader. She'd always assumed she'd take the position at some point, but not like this. It was especially because she really didn't feel like it. It took all she could to just not have a fucking mental breakdown from watching her friends and her people get torn apart by the invisible force of Jashin's power. That fucker. Kuretsuchi was gonna get revenge on that fucker if it was the last damn thing she did. The 5 Cage sat at the table. If they had their hats, they would have placed them on the table. Instead, they took a kunai, wrapped it in their village's insignia, and placed it on the table. We, the Cage, call the 5 Cage Summit Conference into order. Tsunade, I, Mei, Gaara, and Kuretsuchi said. Temari exhaled slowly. She was used to seeing Gaara not sleeping, but he wasn't looking well. She thought the busy work might have kept him from thinking too much about the deaths, but it seemed that wasn't the case. On their side, Yugao and Makoto thought the same of Tsunade. Her hair was frazzled and her chakra control of her appearance had been distorted slightly, a few of her wrinkles showing through on her skin. It seemed the sleep the Hokage received hadn't done too much for her. Mei leaned forward and rubbed her eyes. What she wouldn't give for some sleep as well. She'd effectively gotten none since they arrived in this frozen domain. The cold had frozen her tears for Chojuro and her countrymen. If only it could feel the wound in her chest. I believe we should go over the most important order of business first. How are Naruto and Kushina doing? Mei questioned. Tsunade inhaled slowly and then exhaled, the cold making her shiver. She was so tired. Well, there is at least good news regarding that. Despite some scares, they will make a full recovery in a week or less, Tsunade said. Kuretsuchi gawked. A fucking week? She questioned, catching herself for her attitude. Clenching her fists beneath the table, she exhaled and leaned back. Excuse me, she apologized, even if she sure as hell didn't feel like doing it, especially not to Konoha of all people. Thankfully for her, everyone else was much too tired to care about the strictest etiquette. I'm inclined to agree with the Tsuchikage. How is that even possible? I questioned. The things he'd seen that night seemed beyond the realm of shinobi. He'd also seen how beaten Uzumaki Naruto was by the end of the battle. He shouldn't even be alive. Tsunade bit her lip, but finally, she relented. Well, you could say a god was looking out for him. I imagine the reason Naruto and Kushina are recovering so quickly is because they have the god of death's power flowing through their veins, she admitted. Yugao and Makoto remained quiet, and emotionless even when Mei, and Kuretsuchi stared at the Hokage with expressions of disbelief, confusion, and utter shock. Gaara remained quiet. He had no reason to be shocked. He was one of the people revived by Naruto after all. Kuretsuchi snorted. Look here, Hokage, we're trying to have a serious conversation here. If you've got the time for jokes, then do it somewhere else. Kuretsuchi said, already feeling her patience reaching its limits. Mei opened her mouth but then slowly closed it. I'll admit it does sound ridiculous when you say it so seriously, she spoke. Still, if that were somehow the case, then, that might explain why Kushina was alive. It had been blowing news that the Kyuubi had assaulted Konoha. While only a young girl at the time, Mei knew what that meant for her cousin. She'd mourned Kushina many days, never knowing about her son. When Mei met Kushina and Naruto, it seemed surreal but the joy kept her from bringing it up. However, it was the Raikage who clenched his fists. No, it's not that ridiculous. I'd heard the rumors of the Hyuga clan finding the favor of the Shinigami. I thought I was seeing things when I saw Hisashi Hyuga on the battlefield. I imagine if we were back in Kumo, if we opened his burial place, there'd be no body. He said, casting an accusatory glance at the Hokage. For her credit, she tried not to smile. I can attest to the Hokage's statement. I am one of the people who was revived by Uzumaki Naruto, Gaara said. Temari widened her eyes, all faces swiftly turning toward the cage. Gaara didn't allow their gazes to unsettle him. In fact, he'd long made his peace with letting this information be known. At this moment, they didn't have the luxury of secrets. I'd been kidnapped by the Akatsuki and Shukaku was extracted from me. I don't know when my consciousness returned, but I was laying in front of Naruto. When I opened my eyes, I saw the vast wealth of power surrounding him. I also saw the mark of the Shinigami placed upon his soul. He was granted power and authority over the realm of death as the messenger of the Shinigami. I'm told Lady Chiyo was going to sacrifice herself to save me if he hadn't intervened, Gaara replied. The other three Kage looked at him. Wisely, Temari kept her mouth shut, but she knew she'd be getting a damn answer for all of this. So that also explains the resurgence of a few Uchiha members. Konoha has been slowly bolstering its forces as usual, Kuretsuchi replied. If that were the case then I doubt they would have revived the Kage. The fact that there hasn't been a sudden explosion of powerful shinobi, leads me to believe that Naruto-san's power isn't completely absolute. There must be conditions in place, correct? Mei asked. Tsunade nodded. Indeed, I am told that in the beginning, Naruto had to kill 2 people to revive 1 person. It was set upon him by the Shinigami to make not just him, but all of us remember to respect death and its role in our lives. Now, he merely needs to kill 1 person to revive 1. As far as I'm aware, he hasn't revived anyone else recently, she admitted. I leaned forward. So that means that all those we've lost have a chance at being revived? He asked, trying not to show too much excitement. It was that excitement which seemed to spread throughout the room. Kuretsuchi breathed out, knowing that there was at least a chance she could see her grandfather and her men again. Mei would have Chojuro back. Gaara and Temari would have Kankuro. Tsunade, however, remained stoic. I am not sure. All of what Naruto's done has been mortal matters, things done by our own hands. This clearly isn't the same issue. With the cult of Jashin bringing about their god, I'm not sure what this means for us. Plus, we have to assume that those souls can't be revived until that god is taken down, she answered truthfully. She didn't wish to bring the mood down, but everything had to remain within expectations. So not likely. Much as I hate to give you Konoha guys any praise, I don't think any of us could hope to do what that guy did. Still, if even he can't beat Jashin, then what other hope do we have? Kuretsuchi asked. Unfortunately, none of the other cage had an answer. Well, I believe we best find an answer soon. I am sorry to say that unless Naruto defeats Jashin in a month or two, none of us will survive, Tsunade said. The room was utterly silent. The Hokage's words hung like a noose over the throats of all those present. Yugao and Makoto glanced at each other in worry. What do you mean? I questioned, his voice oddly low. The snow here has shown to have chakra-draining properties. Many have been feeling lethargic as the days go on. Konoha doesn't have enough supplies to host so many people like this. When Naruto took us, a lot of our food, water, and other supplies were either left or destroyed. We've been running through the food stores available and we won't be able to meet the demand for so many. I say a month because that's when we won't be able to supply everyone. We'd have to start choosing who to feed. And who to let starve, Gaara finished. Mei scowled and clenched her fists. Is there truly nothing else we can do? Perhaps we should assemble a scouting team. There could be something out there that we can feast on, she reasoned. On that, we agree. We could also try and get the boy to send us somewhere else. I assume he was planning on sending us back eventually. This was probably a place to simply help us regroup, the Raikage assumed with the others agreeing. We also run the risk of being sent to a worse place. That said, the snow has one benefit. Every time it drains chakra to its lowest point, it somehow strengthens the coils, making them much stronger and doubling their size. This would be a good training ground if we could somehow sustain ourselves here, the Hokage commented. A double-edged sword, Kuretsuchi hummed. Tsunade nodded, rubbing her nose between her hands. Now, the problem with Naruto is, I'm not exactly sure how to help him. The things he's done are beyond even the realm of ninjutsu. Even our best couldn't hurt that guy. I don't know what Naruto needs to overcome someone like him, Tsunade replied. The others remained silent for a little while before Mei held up her hand. A moment, Cage. If I recall, the Akatsuki are living in these very walls as well. Though they are international criminals, we are aware that they have the other Biju. If the Kyuubi, Sanbi, and Hachibi are in their respective Jinchuriki, then they must have the others. Having the rest of the Biju could increase our combat effectiveness, she commented, which made the cage look at her. I'm inclined to agree, but it would be very tense. The Akatsuki are all known to be S-rank criminals. The last thing we can do is waste our resources and men picking fights with them. We'd also need to select individuals to house them. We also don't know if the Biju will even be compliant in helping us, Gaara said. And why wouldn't they? I questioned. We've not exactly given them a reason to help us, the cage returned. They are too dangerous to be left in the world as they please. Kuretsuchi argued. Gaara closed his eyes and hummed. So will we turn on Naruto too because he's grown so powerful? He asked. Kuretsuchi responded with a growl before the Hokage tapped the table. We're getting off topic here. I agree with the cage's assessment. I propose the 5 of us go to the Akatsuki and have them release the Biju to us. Surely even they will understand the gravity of this situation. Whatever their goals are, they won't accomplish them here. Though for the safety of all our men and returning to our home, we best not aggravate them, Tsunade proposed. Kuretsuchi leaned back in her seat, really wishing she had something to drink to make her forget today. How about we put a cork in that before we find out if your golden boy can send us somewhere else? I'd rather not go groveling before those guys unless it's a last resort. However, if we'll have to, could we also get him to revive the previous Jinchuriki hosts who died? They should already have enough training of the beasts to not lose control, right? The granddaughter of the deceased Tsuchikage questioned. I seemed to perk up at this the most. Yeah, he could do that, couldn't he? The Raikage asked. If you'd be willing to sacrifice however many of them have died to bring them back, then I can bring the matter up, but I know Naruto would rather die himself than do that, Tsunade stated, a hard glare in her eyes. Is this really the fucking time for morals? I angrily asked, slamming his hand on the desk. Yugao and Makoto grabbed their swords. Temari grabbed her fan. Ao prepared his Byakugan. Darui and Karui grabbed their own blades. The Iwa shinobi grabbed their kunai. Then you're welcome to sacrifice yourself first, Raikage Dono. If not, then I think our people have had enough of killing each other for one day. I for one will not allow more of my people to die unnecessarily, Mei asserted. The Raikage was clearly less than pleased, as was Kuretsuchi, but with the table being 3-2 they were forced to concede. While we might not know what to do with Naruto, we still have 2 other Jinchuriki that we can train. The training of the Sanbi and Hachibi can be done with great effectiveness, especially in an environment such as this. I suggest we start training them as soon as possible, Mei proposed. Of that, I agree as well, the Raikage announced. Yugao and Makoto eyed each other once more as the cage continued to speak on various topics. After about 2 or 3 hours, things finally began to settle down. It became quite clear that even the village leaders had grown utterly exhausted with the conversation. With this, we, the 5 Cage, call this first round of the 5 Cage Summit to close. Tsunade said, grabbing her kunai. We agree. The other 4 said, grabbing their kunai as well. The cage then clashed their blades together as a sign of unity. They were then allowed to leave. Gaara left first with Tamari not far behind him. Mei and Ao left second. Kuretsuchi and her shinobi left third. Then, I, Karui, and Darui. This left Tsunade, Makoto, and Yugao alone. Finally, the Hokage dropped into her chair and laid her head back. It's actually a little funny. It got the fucking end of the world to get the nations to work together. I always knew the brat would be destined for something insane, but never something like this. You're both dismissed, she said, staring off to the side. Not speaking a word, the 2 left swiftly, which left Tsunade alone for the first time in a long while. After a long while, the quiet sobs of the Godime Hokage filled the meeting room as she laid her head on the desk. Chapter 76. Quote, forgiveness has nothing to do with absolving a criminal of his crime. It has everything to do with relieving oneself of the burden of being a victim, letting go of the pain and transforming oneself from victim to survivor, by C.R. Strahan. Conan glared harshly as she stood before her former associates, the members of the Akatsuki. As expected, no one was willing to share a housing space with so many notorious criminals. That left a lot of room for her former teammates to pursue their own interests. Of course, that didn't stop an entire squad of shinobi from being stationed outside the building to monitor them. It wasn't hard for Conan to sneak in either way. Nagatao glared back at her, his decrepit body attached to that mechanical walker from his excessive use of the Rinnegan to control the paths of pain. As far as she was aware, aside from Obito, this was the first time the other Akatsuki members had seen their leader in such a state. As always, the diva path was between him and the others, ready to remind them all that though he might be physically weak, he could just as easily turn the tide if need be. You really think I'll believe that? Nagato asked. Conan's frown deepened. Nagato, you are my friend. You have always been my friend, but I have started to get fed up with what you think. Perhaps I did believe in your vision at some point, but I think it was because I rathered you not fall into darkness without someone to look out for you. I don't know how powerful the Jubi is, but if it's anything like that man Uzumaki Naruto was facing, then even you can see where the end result of your goals. Congratulations, you'll create a world where this is peace, a peace with absolutely no one to appreciate it. A dead world where nothing lives. It's time we stopped this meaningless crusade of ours, she fired back. Nagato snarled. Meaningless, Conan. Nothing was more meaningless than all the deaths perpetuated by the world of shinobi. If nothing, perhaps this event will prove where our world was always headed against this endless cycle of pain. If you're not here to come back into Akatsuki, then why are you here? He asked. Conan slowly inhaled and then exhaled. Nagato, you and I both know that the power displayed by Uzumaki Naruto was not born of chakra. It was a power vastly superior to that. I have also come to know that it was the power which changed the very nature of the Kyuubi no Yoko. The 9-tailed fox was already the most powerful beast out of the 9. Now, its power has already grown to even greater heights than before. That monster, the Jubi, the weapon you were hoping to create won't come to pass now that the Kyuubi is no longer comprised of chakra. The Biju are useless to you in Akatsuki, she returned. Her eyes turned to Kisame, who suddenly started laughing. You want us to surrender the Biju back to the cage to help against that Jashin guy, don't you? He asked, lugging Samahata on his shoulder. Conan was thankful Tobi wasn't here. The man had a lot of sway with Nagato, despite her friend trying to convince her that she was wrong. Either way, Conan nodded. That's right. I already know you're holding the Biju in the Ghetto Mazo. You all know as well as I do that we can't stay in this world forever. We'll have to return to our world eventually. We suffered a devastating loss even with 2 Jinchuriki and thousands of shinobi from every nation. If we're going to stand a chance, we're going to need the other Biju, and I don't think any of you are keen on becoming Jinchuriki yourselves, Conan replied. The regent chuckled. And so must everyone play their part upon the grand stage as the coming drama continues to reach its peak, he spoke, performing to himself for emphasis. The others eyed him curiously, most notably Zetsu. Still, Nagato continued to look at Conan before a snarl came to his face. He was about to speak before his body spasmed into a fit of coughs. Even if I was going to entertain your idea, ridiculous as it is, I cannot currently summon the Ghetto Mazo. Believe that I have tried. The statue is back on Earth, and I know not the god of slaughter's plans with it. If he is even more powerful than we've seen, then I've no doubt that he'll find the statue and make use of it, Nagato answered. Conan widened her eyes, not at all pleased by this current news. Apparently, neither were the people behind her. Well, that certainly saves us this conversation. Conan turned around, utterly surprised to see the 4-cage, and a young Iwakunoichi, coming into the room. It seemed I wasn't the only one who had that idea. I suppose it's not too much of a surprise since there's nowhere for Akatsuki to hide. Naturally, the nations would want them back, Conan thought to herself. The paper user then noticed the Mizukage glance at Kisame. Not much of a shock, considering he was a missing nin from her own village. Not to mention, he had one of Kurigakure's famed swords in his possession. He grinned arrogantly at her, but the Mizukage maintained a neutral gaze, choosing instead to turn back to the rest of the Akatsuki leader. As for Tsunade, she struggled to keep her face calm. Though they were much older, she recognized the blue-haired woman and the red-haired man. They were those AIM orphans that Jiraiya had picked up and taken care of during the Second Great Shinobi War. She wondered what Jiraiya would think if he saw his pupils in such a tragic manner. Nagato frowned. This matter would have to be done delicately. He still hadn't forgotten that his parents had been killed by Konoha shinobi. Nevertheless, this wasn't the opportunity to start a war. With his true body so close, Nagato wasn't so sure he'd make it out alive. Additionally, there was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. That power couldn't be underestimated. As much as Nagato was loath to admit it, it'd be borderline impossible to combat such a thing without preparation, something that was basically impossible in the location they were in now. In order to summon the Ghetto Mazo, you would have to speak with the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and get him to send us back to our world. Even then, that's only if this god hasn't done anything with it. For all we know, the other Biju could be under his control, Nagato said, no longer speaking to Conan but to Tsunade and the others. As for the cage, they weren't too pleased by that knowledge. So currently it was 6 Biju to 3. The medic corps had also lost a great number of shinobi from the rest of their wounds. It had been a hard day for all to bury friends and family in the cold snow. At least tensions between the nations had remained at a low for now. Hopefully, it stayed that way. Gaara turned to Conan. We heard you mention something strange. What did you mean when you spoke of this, Jubi? He asked. Conan glanced between the cage and the Akatsuki, everyone waiting on her words. That said, there was something in the regent's gaze that unsettled her. She could practically feel the smile burned on his face behind his mask. Well, it wasn't like they were going anywhere. Yes, I had set out to capture the Sanbi Jinchuriki but wound up being captured myself. During my imprisonment, I spoke with the Sanbi itself. It showed me things, many things. It showed me what we, the Akatsuki, were creating by assembling all of the Biju. I have seen numerous horrific things, perhaps nothing more than what we experienced a few days ago, but that vision was an almost identical second. The weapon Nagato envisioned to create his version of peace, no one mortal will be able to control it. Everything that we as a society have built and gathered of ourselves came from that singular beast. When I saw what would become of this world, I couldn't stand with Nagato anymore. Many have told horror stories of the Kyuubi and what it can do. I urge you all to believe that these tales would be kid stories when compared to the Jubi, she said. The cage tensed. Hell, even some of the Akatsuki tensed. They looked at her and none could deny the tremble in her voice. Wait, you said you spoke to the Sanbi. Weren't these just mindless beasts? Kuretsuchi questioned. Conan shook her head. The Biju were in fact quite sentient. It was a surprise to me as well, and I can begin to see how they would harbor such intense resentment toward us. I'm actually not even sure they would help us even if Nagato could summon them. We've not given them a good reason, she answered. They've killed thousands of us. They are too dangerous to roam free. Kuretsuchi argued. I'm not here to argue the morals of freedom and who did what. I don't know. All I know is that we're in the fight of our lives and we should start acting like the adults we claim to be before we end up like nothing. A god was able to force us from our own world. As far as I know, the Jubi hadn't come from nothing. If gods exist, then what exists out there could create something like the Jubi? She asked. Kuretsuchi would have probably dropped to the ground from the sheer amount of stress running through her body if her pride allowed it. It was just one thing after another. Nothing seemed to be making sense. Tsunade inhaled and exhaled. Alright, that's a matter for another time. For now, we should deal with the immediate threat, then we can discuss this Jubi later. We'll make this frank. Akatsuki, can we count on you to aid us against the threat when we return to our world? She questioned. Today's just full of surprises, isn't it? Kisame asked, not believing the words that he'd just heard. We share the same enemy. It's certainly one we can't defeat on our own, Black Zetsu voiced. I am no longer affiliated with the Akatsuki, so I cannot speak for them. However, I will aid Yuri-san as best I can, Konan answered. Tsunade offered her thanks to Konan before she turned back to the rest of the Akatsuki, namely Nagato. He looked at her intensely. As Konan said, we are adults. We must act like it. Akatsuki will help you, but make no mistake. We are not your friends nor your allies. Once this alliance is over, we shall continue on with our own matters until we learn the truth of this, Jubi. For I have not forgiven your village for the sins committed against me and my people. Now get out, Nagato demanded. I scowled, but a hand from the case cage eased him back. Rest assured, boy, none one here has forgotten your sins against us as well. There shall be a settling of accounts one day. He fired back. He then left with the others following behind him. Mei gave one last look to Kisame before she departed as well. Finally, Konan turned her eyes to Nagato. I don't know what it will take you, Nagato, and I'm not telling you to forget what Konoha did to us or you, but at some point, you've got to let it go, she answered before she left via various sheets of flying paper. Nagato gritted his teeth and clenched his hands. Konan, he snarled out in the depths of his mind while the regent quietly observed. Pretty soon, the grand play would be upon them all. A total of 5 days passed since that meeting time. Tsunade rubbed her eyes. That had been another sleepless night for her. Not once had she been allowed a full 8 hours of sleep since that dreadful day. Konoha's supplies continued to slowly dwindle away while efforts began with the training of not only the Hachibi and Sanbi, but also the rest of the Elemental Nation soldiers. Naturally, tensions were still high, but by the authority of the Gokage, all assaulting offenders were to be punished. At a time like this, where they needed every man and able body to be one unit, there was no room for patience or leeway. As for now, Tsunade was doing her rounds through the hospital. After so many days, they had finally gone through everyone and treated those they could. That at least gave the medic staff at least 1 day of rest. All the Hokage had to do was do a brief check on Naruto and Kushina. Once that was over, she would have to make an appearance with the other cage at the training grounds they'd built for all the shinobi. It was set out to be another busy day. Coming upon Naruto and Kushina's room, Tsunade grabbed the door handle. Immediately, she grunted when she felt a great surge of divine energy. Her body shivered and she was nearly brought to her knees. Hell, the only thing holding her up was her hand on that handle. Every cell within her body screamed that she was not privileged to enter the room. To gaze upon the inside of it was to go blind from the power within. Thankfully, the power lessened. Catching her breath, she swung the door open. To her surprise, Naruto was awake. He stood over his mother, looking down at her sleeping visage. Tsunade spoke not a word, unable to resist the blush on her face. Naruto was practically glowing in a bright, white light. The bandages they'd wrapped him in had come undone. The Shinigami's robe covered his body, keeping the cold off him. His eyes were like 2 blazing balls of fire and his hair fell off the back of his head. Tsunade dared not speak a word lest she tremble when his gaze fell upon her. Still, as his doctor, she ought to say something. Yet, what could she say that wouldn't have her bumbling like a buffoon? Naruto leaned over and kissed his mother on her lips. The power from his body slipped into hers, granting her the same ethereal glow as he had. He caressed her cheek, for his heart was filled with immense love for her. He then pulled back and faced Tsunade. She jerked in response to his intense, yet hollow gaze. He didn't even seem like the same happy-go-lucky brat these days. She tried to maintain eye contact, but her eyes started moving downward of their own volition. She wanted to curse her human weakness, but it was just impossible to resist. She was practically compelled to bow her head in reverence to him, just like Jashin, the man who killed her best friend. "I will be leaving, Ba-chan. Do not look for me," Naruto said, what sounded like 3 other voices moving through him. Na," Tsunade stammered out before the Kyuubi Jinchuriki turned to his mother once again. Again, he kissed her. He'd never tire of doing that. Naruto turned away from the Godime Hokage and faced the window. He pushed them open and Tsunade could only watch as he sucked in his legs and flew out of the room without nary a sound. The blonde cage merely continued to stand in the doorway as he flew into the horizon and disappeared behind a vast sheet of ice, snow, and wind. "What the? Naruto, wait!" Tsunade shouted, finally finding her voice. She ran to the open window, but she already knew he was too far to hear her. Her salvation, the village's salvation, had just literally, and figuratively, gone out the window. If not for his utterly terrifying presence, Tsunade might have chased after him just to bash him over the head. Tsunade continued to look for any small sign of Naruto, but there was none. So, she sighed and closed the window from the blistering cold. Pieces of the snow had stuck to her skin, already sucking away her chakra before she wiped them off. The Godime Hokage then turned back to Kushina. She was still sleeping. Tsunade took the time to check the Uzumaki matriarch's vitals. While this was for Kushina's benefit, this was also for the Hokage's as well. She needed this to put her thoughts in order. She'd have to tell the rest of the cage about this recent development. Hell, she could already see the Raikage and temporary Tsuchikage complaining about him leaving without a single word. She also wondered what that would do to the rest of the morale of the village. She had no idea where Naruto went. The cold would be the death of anyone who ventured out so far. Finally done, Tsunade closed the door to Kushina's room. Unknown to her, Kushina slowly opened her eyes and frowned. "Sochi, you really are my son. Always so reckless," Kushina thought before she closed her eyes, ready to delve back into her own training. Had it not been for that, she would have woken up days ago. However, it became clear that she wasn't strong enough. She'd need grander power if she were to face someone on the level of Jashin. Surprisingly, she had a benefactor working with her this time. "Are you ready to continue? You must not waste time," a voice said from deep within the recesses of her mind. "I don't need you to remind me. I understand," Kushina said as she closed her eyes. She inhaled and exhaled slowly, letting her body fall asleep for the second time since she'd woken up. In the meantime, Tsunade left the hospital, grabbing hold of her coat. She braved the cold after having assigned Shizune to look after Kushina. Of course, things were still rather tense and awkward between the former kunoichi and her assistant. Duty claimed that Tsunade should kill Shizune for breaking and spilling Konoha's secrets, and she'd hardened herself in her guilt to do that, but Naruto had stopped her. He claimed Shizune under his authority, which Tsunade couldn't dispute as she was a living being under the realm of the shinigami. She'd never admit it, but she was thankful for that. However, that left many things unfinished between the both of them. Then, that was just compounded with other shit that Tsunade really didn't want to deal with. A brief walk through the village, Tsunade found herself standing in front of the building where the Bee and Yuri were training. 5 guards stood in front of the main doors, each one a shinobi from each village. The Konoha one saluted her, but the others paid her no real mind. At a time like this, Tsunade hadn't the mind to care too much for the international discourtesy. She stepped inside the room, watching Yura stare down at the battlefield with worry. Hey, the things thousands of people from different villagers could build when they were forced to come together. A large explosion moved over the field as Tsunade watched Yuri stumble back, her body glowing with the power of the Sanbi. She scowled while Bee landed next to her. "Focus, both of you. There's no time for rest. We're gonna keep doing this until you get it right," I shouted as a pillar of sand swirled around the both of them. Gaara and Mei stood at the Raikage's side. Yuri cursed before she held up her hands and slammed them on the ground, shaking the arena as the cage and the shinobi with them trembled, falling to their knees. Yuri, that's enough. I know you're frustrated, but this is what you signed up for. Do it again. Yugao shouted. The younger redhead opened her mouth and grumbled. She was ready to respond before Tsunade spoke. Unfortunately, this is going to have to be a break for everyone. Tsunade shouted, startling everyone present. Yura turned her head and so did Yuri. Yugao and the other cage looked at her. We haven't got the time to stop for every little thing. I exclaimed. It's urgent news, Tsunade returned. There were a few murmurs through the arena before I sucked his teeth. He dismissed everyone while Tsunade turned to Yura. This news includes you and Yuri. Get her, she said. Confused, Yura agreed. She gathered her exhausted sister, Kakashi, Yugao, and a few others from the Uzumaki family. They were gathered around a meeting room with the rest of the cage. What's going on? Fuka whispered to Riza. The mother of Tayuya shook her head that she wasn't sure. Tayuya leaned against the wall while Yuri continued to catch her breath. Kakashi and Yugao were silently observing as the cage came together. Alright, what is this oh so urgent news? Kuretsuchi asked. Tsunade faced her. Naruto's awake, she said, getting gasps and looks of shock from everyone present. Yura released the breath she'd been holding while Yuri couldn't resist cracking a wide smile. Fucking finally, you dipshit, Tayuya said under her breath, clearly pleased with the knowledge as well. Of course, the cage were thrilled as well, yet they remained measured. I sense a but coming, Mei replied, her eyes focusing on the Godime Hokage. Naturally, that reigned in the emotions of those around. Kakashi and Yugao frowned. Tsunade sighed. He's left the village and disappeared into the snowy mountains. I have no idea where he's gone or when he'll come back. He just told me not to go searching for him, she finished. What? He left? Kuretsuchi questioned, slamming her hands on the table. Gaara thought about this. Did he say what he would be leaving for? He asked. Tsunade shook her head. Not to my knowledge. I can only guess that he's doing something dangerous that he can't be around us. Either that, or it was the shinigami that called him away. In any case, I don't think we'll be getting any answers out of him for the time being, she replied. Kuretsuchi bit her lip while Yura quickly grew concerned. Yuri saw her big sister's expression. And Kushina? Riza questioned. Still sleeping. I estimate her to be awake in 2 or 3 days, Tsunade explained. Quietly, Yura slipped away and closed the door. She walked up and down the arena's dark hallways. How surprising that all of this had been built in only 2 days since the meeting of the cage. Moving through its corridors, she came back to the battlefield area where her little sister had just been fighting. Of course, Yura wished to join in but... Yura, you still need to work on your sealing jutsu. I don't think your current level will be enough to give Yuri what she needs, Riza said. Of course, Yura was aware this wasn't from a place of malice or ill intent. It was true that she'd only been around the Chunin level when she left Konoha. Her career hadn't even been that outstanding anyway. Of all the Uzumaki present, Yura couldn't deny it. She was the weakest. Yuri had long since surpassed her in strength and Kushina was merely a step or two away from being close to her lover. Now, obviously, Yura continued in her training, diligently even. Yet, she'd not been able to take care of Yuri when it mattered. Her little sister was transitioning into the proper thoughts, ideals, and fears of a woman. Not only that, Yuri was suffering from things Yura wasn't too sure she could help with. When she went to sleep, shivering from the intense cold wind against her window, she too wished for strength. If she were stronger, would she have been able to make a difference? She wished to help them. She wished to prove her worth. She wished to earn the right to stand with the rest of them. Yura clenched her fists, falling to her knees. But I don't know if I can. I don't know how I can help. I want to be relied on too. Ni-sama, I don't want you to handle it all alone. I want to be there with you. I want you to share your problems with me. I want to fix this. I don't want to lose my family anymore. What must I do? Shinigami-sama, please tell me. Yura pleaded, anguish threatening to overwhelm her very soul. Her hair sprawled over her face while tears fell down her cheek. Suddenly, Yura stiffened when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up, noticing no one around. Confused, she noticed the form of a person walking around a corner. Ordinarily, though embarrassing, she wouldn't care if someone saw her, but the flow of the hair made her stand up. She remembered that hair, even if it had changed from red to white. Yura walked to the corridor and saw no one. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the figure walk away. She swiftly followed after them. Her travels took her to the very top of the building behind the door. She grabbed the handle and pulled it open. Instantly, she stared out into the freezing, numbing cold of the dimension Naruto had taken them to. She took a step back from fear of the snow, but there was the figure amidst the frozen wasteland near the railing. The figure was tall and slim, a feminine figure, making it easy to understand that the person was a woman. Her hair was long and sleek, nary a strand out of place. Yura looked out in the snow. Does she want me to go out there? Yura questioned. Despite her own judgment, Yura stepped out into the cold, hard blizzard. The wind stung her face and the snow clung to her body. Her breath expelled as white frost from her lips. Her chakra started to drop the further out she got until she made it to where the woman was standing. When Yura turned her head, she stared at the woman. Her lips trembled, refusing to speak the words that her soul anguished on. Finally, the woman put a hand on Yura's shoulder. The young redhead looked up at the woman and she saw a bright smile on the face of the woman. That smile broke through the bindings which held Yura's lips in their silence. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Forgive me for being weak, Yura pleaded, exhaustion threatening to drop her to her knees. However, before she could fall, the woman touched her cheek and wiped away her tears. Once she had Yura's attention, keeping her smile, she pointed out into the harsh snowstorm. Beyond the ice-capped mountains, beyond the plains of frost, beyond the boundary of mortal sense, she pointed out there. Yura looked out, very confused by what she was being told to do. She sought to question the woman, but when she turned her head the woman was gone. She was alone on the rooftop, the snow continuing to fall and continuing to drain her chakra. She looked at the large mountain range where no one dared tread. Somewhere out there, Naruto was there. Yura closed her eyes for a moment, her body shivering from the deadly cold. Nevertheless, when she opened her eyes, she glared out into the vast nothingness. I must be crazy, Yura thought before she turned around and headed back inside. Yuri groaned as she walked through the door, her body aching from the hours of training. Everything burned and she almost thought she'd pass out. Yurine, please tell me there's something to eat in here. Yuri exclaimed, even her voice cracking from the strain. There was no response. Yuri raised an eyebrow. It seemed so weird for the compound to be so quiet. She really didn't like the silence. It made her think of things she really didn't want to. Though the training was hard, that was one benefit she enjoyed. She was much too focused on not getting her teeth pushed in to think about the guilt concerning Yukimaru, Konohamaru, and Moegi. Nei-chan. Yuri called out. She's not here. Can you please stop shouting? The Sanbi Jinchuriki turned her head and saw the outside patio door open. Surprised, she saw Karui and Omoi enter the room. She remembered seeing them a couple of times. According to she, they were also Uzumaki that hadn't opted to join the clan, instead preferring to stay in their home nation. Though sad, Yuri accepted it. Hell, even her sister had left Konoha's walls and Yuri had basically done it when she and Naruto left with the issuing of his banishment. And what are you two doing here? Yuri asked. If she sounded rude, then she didn't mean to. A lot of irritation and exhaustion was speaking for her. Thankfully, it seemed that neither Karui nor Omoi minded. We exchanged letters with Shi-san numerous times while he was in Konoha. We always wanted to visit, but never found the right opportunity. This seemed like as good a time as any, Omoi answered with a shrug. In almost any other circumstance, Yuri would have smiled at them coming. Now, the joy just wouldn't reach her lips no matter how hard she tried. Oh, well, it's good to see you guys. I think Fukune and Riza-san will be coming back soon so they can accommodate you guys if you need it. Did either of you see where Yurine went? She then asked. We saw her when she came through the door. She went upstairs, but she came down just as fast with some sort of pack. She hasn't returned since, Karui answered. Yuri blinked. That wasn't like her sister. Did she say where she was going? She inquired. Not that we're aware of, Omoi replied. Yuri quickly grew worried. That wasn't like her sister at all. She closed her eyes and tried to sense her older sister's unique chakra, but the snow and ice were too potent. She couldn't push through it to sense anything out of her immediate area, even with the Isobu's help. Concerned, Yuri ran up to her sister's room and opened the door. It didn't take her long to notice a note on her desk. The young woman grabbed the note and stared down at it. You might think me crazy, Yuri, for what I'm about to do. I don't know when I'll be back, or if I'll even be back at all, but if it is Shinigami-sama's, well then you'll see me again. I'm going to go look for Nisama. I know he told us not to, but I feel this is where I'm being led. At a time like this, none of us can afford to be alone, not you and not him. Don't eat crazy while I'm gone. Be sure to train hard and stay out of trouble. I love you. Yura. Yuri clenched the note in her hands and stared out the window in shock. The vast nothingness lay in front of her eyes. She dashed out of her sister's room and landed down the stairs, shocking Karui and Omoi. She pushed open the door and ran out into the snow. Even with the snow draining her chakra, the Sanbi Jichuriki sped through the village until she burst through the front gates. She looked out, panting and huffing. Shinobi of Konoha came up behind her worried, but Yuri ignored them. Her eyes looked out over the great distance, no sign of her sister anywhere. Her sister was actually gone. Nei-chan, Yuri thought, clenching the note in her hands. Yura grunted as she clenched her coat over herself. The chilling snow clung to her, but she pursued her course faithfully. Each step buried her legs up to her knees in snow. She looked up and saw the faint glow of the spirit leading her just ahead. The young woman glanced back at Konoha. I can do this. I know I can, Yura said to herself. She pulled up the straps of her backpack and trudged on. Her chest was hot and her fingers were cold. Exhaustion already started to overtake her as her chakra continued to drain away. Nevertheless, she forced one leg up. She then forced up the other. One in front of the other, over and over. Yura Uzumaki disappeared into the frozen wasteland. I shall say it again, Shikyo-sama, you're quite possibly the biggest fool I've ever seen. Even bigger than my brother, Tobarama said as he, Madara, and Kagura watched the blonde stare up at the largest ice mountain in the midst of this ice dimension. Your opinion is noted, Naruto replied, throwing all his clothes except his pants into the snow. He inhaled and exhaled slowly. He then summoned everyone else from his sword. Pakura, Dan, Yahiko, Gari, Suiren, Kimimaro, and the kindred came out. He glanced at them for a long while. He would have taken out the Kyuubi and Morio, but both refused no matter what he said. Clearly, neither seemed fond of the cold. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki turned back the others. Go, he ordered. They spoke not a word and flew up the mountain. When he looked at Kagura, she huffed but flew up as well. That left Naruto alone with Madara and Tobarama. He held out his hand. The two looked at each other. You will regret this, boy. You give the slightest weakness and I will take it, Madara said while Tobarama snorted. And should you allow him do so, I will present a strong argument to the Shinigami of why you shouldn't be allowed to be his summoner. Die with him, and it will be your last one. Tobarama threatened. The two spirits then flew into Naruto, merging their souls into his, at exactly the same time. Instantly, Naruto's eyes shot open. He screamed into the cold air, falling to his knees. His body was racked with pain. His eyes turned bloodshot and dark purple, pulsing veins spread out over his skin. He roared as Honsho exploded from his body and into the sky, his head shoving snow left and right. He could feel Madara and Tobarama battling for dominance within him immediately. It felt like trying to control a wildfire and a seaquake at the same time. Blood spilled out of Naruto's eyes and mouth while he continued to agonize against the two. Right now, he was pretty thankful he hadn't bothered to summon anyone of this level during his first time. He would have been immediately overrun. Naruto tried to will them both down, forcing himself to exert more authority than he ever had before. Fuck. He hadn't even started climbing the mountain and yet he felt like he was already dying, his soul tearing itself to pieces. Every blow between the both of them was like a boom of thunder through his spirit. He tried to keep himself strong, even as he thought his heart might blow out of his chest. However, it was too much. It was all too much. Tobarama had one half of his soul and Madara had the other. Naruto just didn't have the strength to pull them both together. No matter how much strength he exerted, that only seemed to add to their own. In fact, they seemed to be siphoning power from him to further augment their own ferocity. Grabbing the top of his head, Naruto hollered into the cold wind before he fell down into the cold ice. His body lay there in the harshness of the frost as his eyes rolled up into his head. His heartbeat slowed further and further until it stopped altogether. When the patriarch of the Uzumaki clan opened his eyes, he noticed the shinigami before him. As always, the god's cold, heartless gaze made Naruto shiver. The blonde turned over and stared defiantly at the shinigami, even if the gaze was making him feel smaller than he was. Quote, "You're being reckless, boy. You also overestimate yourself. You have not yet earned the right to attempt what you're attempting," the shinigami said while Naruto felt his already shaken up mind snap to pieces. Earn exclamation mark question mark exclamation mark. Naruto stood up and scowled. Earn? Then what the hell do you want me to do? How else am I supposed to beat one of you guys and get our world back? I tried it the logical way, and as far as I'm concerned, that's what got me in the whole mess in the first place. I've got thousands of lives riding on me and I had tens of thousands riding on me back on Earth. Well, guess what? I fucking failed. When it came right down to it, I couldn't back up what I said I would. If I don't do something stupid, what else is left for me? Naruto questioned. The shinigami continued to look at him and Naruto started to get even angrier. You know, you talk about me, but what about you? Watch your tone, Uzumaki Naruto. Choose your next words carefully, the shinigami ordered, the god's voice threatening his summoner should he take a step too far. There was worse things than death that the shinigami could do to those who outright defied him. After a moment, Naruto wisely held his tongue and settled for a sharp glare. Nevertheless, the shinigami spoke. Indeed, it would have changed the outcome had you summoned me. You would have beaten him and you have freed the entire world, nay the entire universe from the terror of Jashin, the shinigami answered, surprising the blonde all the more. That also didn't do anything but worsen his mood. Then why didn't you? Then, who would save the world from Uzumaki Naruto? Would you truly wish me to kill my own summoner? The god of death asked, silencing Naruto. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki looked at the floating specter with wide eyes. Who would save the world from me? He thought to himself. He opened his mouth, yet silence was the only thing on his tongue. He wished to refute. He wished to question. He wished for a damn explanation. He wished for anything. Yet, nothing answered him. The only thing afforded him, the only thing he'd earned was the cold, yet sympathetic gaze of the god who'd contracted himself to him. Know that this would not be a normal death. It would be one that not many have had to endure. It is a punishment that Mother never wished upon any creature that she's created. And I shall let you know, should you have passed away under such a circumstance, everything you'd done, everything you worked towards, everything you'd pursued, would be undone in a single instant. I warn you to remember that. Make no mistake, Shikyo, you are powerful and you have indeed stepped into the realm of our domain, yet you have only set your feet upon a staircase that ascends beyond your own thinking. You will not contest Jashin. Your hubris has grown much too high. Your strength will not be enough to overcome him, even with those two you're training with, he said. Naruto's nails dug into his palms. His soul still felt like it was collapsing, Madara and Tobirama still fighting over it. However, that pain was nothing like the hopelessness he felt. If there were any left to shed, Naruto might have cried. How do I make my strength enough to beat him? How can I protect everyone? Please help me, Naruto urged. The shinigami looked down upon him for a long while. Already, the blonde's hair had turned into a mix of black and white, evidenced by the two spirits rampaging throughout his body. The summoner of the shinigami doubled over, wondering if the pain would make him go unconscious again. Just before he did, the pain suddenly stopped. Naruto released the breath he didn't know he was holding. In fact, he felt even more at peace than he had in a long time. His body felt wonderful, bathed by the light of divine energy. Opening his eyes, he saw Madara and Tobirama standing next to him. It wasn't just them, however. He also saw Pakura and the others standing a little further back. What happened? He questioned. He leaned up and rubbed his aching head. While reckless, the idea you came up with was rather interesting. Something I've enjoyed witnessing. However, you've gone about it the wrong way. Additionally, I shall provide you with a great help that will no doubt answer the questions not just about yourself, but also about those around you. I shall instruct you. Why make use of those who know not your struggles nor what you've endured? Would it not be better, more enriching for your soul to think of those who have been with you since the beginning? Once you've reached the top, I shall be waiting for you. Remember Shikyo, paradise and hell. They are at your disposal, the shinigami said before he faded away. Naruto watched his summon leave. He turned to Madara and Tobirama. They both gazed at him, but they faded away as well. This left Naruto alone with Pakura, Dan, Gari, Kimimaro, Yahiko, and Suiran. He looked at the six of them. The six of them looked at him. Try as he might, Naruto couldn't keep the glare off his face. He waved them away and found himself awake at the bottom of the mountain, freezing from so much snow covering him. He leaned up and coughed. Maybe it was a bad idea to remove my shirt like this, he said to himself. Using his energy to warm himself up, Naruto glanced back at the mountain and gasped in awe. There was a presence of celestial might in the firmament of the skies. Stars rested in the outer space and comets sailed across the horizon. The ice blowing in the wind seemed like a spectacular painting of the beautiful air. The top of the mountain was covered by large clouds and small pieces of lightning. The northern lights stretched through the sky like a scarf wrapped around the neck of this dimension. Suddenly, what Naruto had planned seemed more challenging than before. In fact, there was something about it that just resonated with his spirit, his sense of self, and his strength of purpose. For all he'd done, seen, and dreamt, Naruto suddenly seemed so small when compared to the magnitude of the mountain before him. Out here, there would be no one to help him if he called. There was no easy path or someone to pull him up when he fell. There was no one here but himself, not unlike when he'd been growing up. Naruto walked up to the base of the mountain. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed the open groves of the rock, brushing away the snow. Then, he climbed. He climbed up the mountain, the cold winds already pushing against him violently. Naruto dug his toes into the mountain and pulled himself up further. The stones hurt and the rocks embedded into the soles of his feet. Nevertheless, he pulled himself up again. His breath was hot and his body was cold. Naruto grabbed one of the rocks, watching some of the snow crumble off to the side. He inhaled and exhaled, the cold stinging his insides. He pulled himself up further. Higher and higher, Naruto Uzumaki ascended the mountain. Higher and higher, he'd rebuild his confidence. Higher and higher, he'd ascend to his destiny. Sasuke frowned as he sat on the rooftop of his house, looking up at the stars in the sky and the aurora lights surrounding them. For once, the blizzard had settled down, allowing all of those within Konoha to view the grand spectacle. So this is where you were. What are you doing out here? Sasuke didn't turn around, aware of his mother's voice. She sat down next to him, smiling. Thinking, Sasuke replied, taking in the breathtaking view. The cold air stung his nose. He never liked the cold. About, Makoto questioned. Sasuke grunted. You ask a lot of questions sometimes, he replied, hoping not to sound disrespectful. It was just an observation of sorts. Thankfully, Makoto didn't seem to mind. In fact, she smiled. I suppose I do. I've missed out on much of your life. I have to make up for lost time, she said smiling. Unfortunately, she saw that her son wasn't reciprocating her actions. The smile fell from her face as she looked up at the lights with him. Where's Yuna? Makoto asked. Sleeping. She's got a lot of work tomorrow. It seems everyone's too busy lately. Despite the village being filled with people, it's like the touch of death still hasn't been removed from the people. I don't like the silence like this. I sometimes hear the weeping of people and it reminds me of those first few nights when our entire family was wiped out, he answered. Makoto glanced at her son. He continued looking up at the sky, a sort of longing in his eyes. Yes, I've learned a lot about Fugaku that I never thought I might. I see the look in Itachi's eyes sometimes. He still hasn't forgiven himself. I still remember his tears that night, and I wonder how many of them he shed with no friend to help him. It must have been no different for you, but I couldn't be prouder of the men you've both become. And, because you're men, I think I'll have to start deferring to your decisions. If you and Itachi think this is a good idea, then I'll support you, the mother of the two Uchiha said. For the first time, Sasuke looked at his mother. She stared back at him with a wide smile on her face. Sasuke continued to look at her and he looked at her face. Under the glow of the frozen night lights, her eyes seemed to sparkle. Feeling rather odd, he had to admit that his mother was very beautiful. The light reflected off her black hair and Sasuke found himself too mesmerized to look away. Makoto noticed her son's focused gaze and suddenly felt a little self-conscious. Something on my face? She asked. Sasuke stiffened and tore his gaze away. No, it's nothing. Thanks for that. I'll be sure to tell Itachi tomorrow. If it wasn't so severe, I might suggest this option, but I already said it before. The Dobie might not have given me all my family back, but he gave me enough. And I'll be the first to die before I let any of you get ripped away from me again. You, Yuna, Itachi, I will protect all of you. Of that, I swear, Sasuke said resolutely, grabbing her hand. Makoto felt her words die in her throat, aware of just how big her son's hands were. I guess we'll hold you to your words then, she said, the warmth from her son flowing into her body. It seemed like such a stark contrast to the cold. After a moment, Sasuke became aware of himself and released his mother's hand. Not sure what to say, he looked back at the sky. Makoto leaned against him and smiled. You know, with Itachi relinquishing his right to the Uchiha clan. That makes you the clan heir. You'll have to take the position from me eventually. Naruto-kun's currently beating you, she teased, which made Sasuke snort. That he hasn't caused his compound to burn into the ground is a miracle of God itself. I've already settled my revenge. Now, I will indeed restore our clan, and I will create one where no child will have to cut down their parents to keep others safe. The Dobie might have gotten a head start, but I'll overtake him eventually, Sasuke said. Makoto laughed, but didn't respond further. As the night continued to draw on, they continued to stay out there. In fact, Makoto noticed a few couples sitting on their own roofs, watching the lights as well. She even watched a few of them kiss each other lovingly, finding some sort of pleasure and happiness in this hopeless future for themselves. My, they're all quite affectionate. I guess at times like this, it's good to be bold, she thought. That said, seeing this, Makoto wondered if she should try dating again. At least when the world returned to normal. Seeing this was actually a little lonely, no matter how warm Sasuke felt. As the night grew long, Sasuke suddenly heard his mother's slow breaths. Turning his head, he saw that she'd gone to sleep. He shook his head before he picked her up. She leaned into his embrace as he went back inside. Making it to her room, he laid her on her bed. For once, a smile came upon the Uchiha's face as he brushed a piece of her hair from the side of her face. He covered her with the sheets and left her room. Then, he returned to his own room where Yuna slept. Once he changed his clothes, he slipped in the bed and wrapped his arms around his lover. Unfortunately, when he woke up the next morning, he noticed that Yuna was already gone. Her black coat was gone from the closet. He sighed, missing seeing her sleeping face. Then again, at least I won't have to hear her complain about her bed hair, he replied with a bit of a smirk. Sasuke entered the living room and noticed Itachi sitting there quietly. Even now, it still seemed so far-fetched that the man who'd been the object of his hatred would now share the spaces they once shared all those years ago. Good morning, Sasuke, Itachi said without turning around. The younger Uchiha grunted, but made himself known. Surprised you're not gone as well. Figured you'd be training Yuri and the Hachibi along with everyone else, Sasuke uttered as he took a seat at the table. I agree that helping Yuri-san is one of the avenues by which we'll obtain victory. We can't neglect the training of the other forces. Improving their strength will make it so we don't start losing others as well. That was another reason for that tragedy a few days ago. We simply weren't strong enough to give Naruto the time he needed. This might be the first time where we're all working for the benefit of humanity instead of ourselves. The techniques that we'll come up with could shape the elemental nations for the next century or even two, he said, staring at the harsh blizzard outside. Assuming we're not at each other's throats when this is all over, Sasuke stated, which made Itachi give something between a snort and a chuckle. Perhaps, Itachi answered. The two brothers settled into a brief silence before Sasuke looked at Itachi. Mother's given us her blessing. If we want strength quickly, this is one of the best ways to do it, Sasuke said. Itachi gave nothing away in terms of facial expression. He just continued to look out the window. Very well, he returned, which surprised Sasuke somewhat. I figured you'd be a bit more against this, Sasuke admitted, looking at his brother with suspicion. Surprisingly, that got a laugh out of Itachi before he cleared his throat. Don't read too much into it. I've heard many tales of the power of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Yes, it would help you, and I definitely. It'd be helpful if we could give Mother and Yuna-san it as well. Mother's already lost one of her eyes from the Regent incident. I can tell his being around unnerves her. Protect her, Sasuke. You don't know it, but she relies on you more than you might think, Itachi replied with a knowing smirk, one that Sasuke didn't really like. And what does that mean? He asked. Who knows? Maybe I'm talking nonsense. Since this is your plan, you'll have to get everything in place. A lot of the doctors will be busy who can potentially do eye transplants. Also, you realize that we'll be disabled for a week or two until our eyes heal. We won't be going anywhere for a little while, Itachi said. Sasuke snorted. Better now than not at all. Fine, I suggested it, then I'll take care of it. Try and keep your schedule clear. Sasuke stopped when there came a knock on the door. Both glanced at each other until Sasuke got up and answered the door. Uchiha Sasuke, your presence has been requested at the hospital along with all available Hinoken members, a Jonin said, leaving before Sasuke could even give confirmation that he got the message. He closed the door and walked back inside. No rest for the weary, little brother, Itachi said, chuckling to himself when Sasuke ignored him with a growl. He marched upstairs and got dressed, but not before informing his mother that they were due at the hospital. His mother awoke with a groan and was ready to leave by the time he had on his Hinoken attire. Alright, Itachi, assume that we'll be back late. You never know these days, Makoto advised as she wrapped her scarf around her neck. Sasuke did the same as Itachi saw them off. The two Uchiha dashed into the blizzard, hopping along snow-laden rooftops. If Makoto was still sleepy, the snow had a cruel way of waking her up. Did they at least say what the problem was? She asked. Not to my knowledge, Sasuke replied. In time, they landed in front of the hospital, meeting up with Kakashi and Yugao. Yo, the one-eyed Jonin said with a smile beneath his mask. Makoto and Sasuke greeted him and Yugao. I take it you guys got the rude Jonin wake-up call too? Yugao asked, getting nods from Makoto and Sasuke. Let's just get inside. It's freezing out here, Sasuke said, eyeing the mass of medic tents with injured shinobi. Clearly, the medic staff was still being overworked, but there seemed to be a system in place amidst all the chaos. The four entered. Speaking to the receptionist, they were guided toward Kushina's room. In the hallway, they saw the entirety of the Uzumaki family waiting. Well, it's just a regular fuckton of guests, isn't it? Tayuya questioned before Riza smacked her over the head. Shut up, Tayuya, the older redhead replied while Fuka and Yuri observed them, the former chuckling to herself. Tayuya snarled at her mother. It seemed like the two would get into another confrontation before the door opened. Everyone turned their attention to it, only to widen their eyes when Kushina stepped through. Glad to see you guys are still loud as ever, Kushina said as she came through the door, nary a scratch on her. Before the leader of Hinoken could brace herself, she groaned when she was enveloped in the hugs of her family. Makoto, Yugao, and Kakashi watched with smiles. Hell, even Sasuke was overjoyed at the sight of his team's leader, though the smile didn't quite reach his face. As for Kushina, though she hugged them and was happy to be in their embrace again, she still sensed the sorrow raging from them all. She was one of the few of their family that returned. Yuri seemed to be holding her the hardest, nigh threatening to collapse to the ground if she let go. Finally, her team was allowed in. Glad to see you awake again, Kushina. I'd call you reckless, but I think you already knew that. You are Naruto-kun's mother after all, Makoto said while Kushina chuckled. Sorry, I'll be sure to hold back the recklessness when I'm trying to keep a damn god entertained, Kushina returned before she pulled Makoto into a hug. She then hugged Yugao and Kakashi. Of course, Sasuke offered her a grunt, but it was a sincere grunt and that was all that mattered. Sort of. In the meantime, Tsunade took the time to appear. As much as I'd like to celebrate your recovery some more, I'm afraid we don't have that luxury. Kushina, is there any way you can track Naruto? He's left the village and no one knows where he is. As I've been told by Yuri, Yura has also vanished to find him. I've sent out a team to look for her, but no one's been able to find anything. Kushina, she'll die out there and we need Naruto back in the village, his presence is the only thing keeping everyone together. We need him, Tsunade said. Kushina frowned but bit her tongue. She turned toward the Hokage and nodded. I've always been able to sense my son since I've been granted the power of the shinigami. I'm sure even Yuri knows where he is to some capacity. However, I trust my son. If he left, then it's clear he feels that whatever he's doing won't be safe enough around the village. I'm sure he knows better than anyone else the severity of the situation. He'll be back. As for Yura, she can be surprisingly stubborn. If she went out there, then I'm sure she'll have a good reason, Kushina commented. This got a frown out of Tsunade. She could tell Kushina didn't have a favorable opinion of her or Konoha at the moment, especially with them having banished Naruto from the village. Tsunade wouldn't say that she couldn't see where that anger was coming from, but surely there were better things for them to work on than this. Besides, I haven't been idle either. I've been doing my own training while I rested, and I think it's something that will benefit all of us. At this point, I don't think we'll have the luxury of safe play anymore, Kushina said, getting everyone's attention. So we're not gonna be kicking Yuri's ass anymore? Tayuya questioned, which got a growl out of Yuri. Kushina patted Yuri's shoulder. Not exactly, she replied, a dangerous smile on her face. It was that smile that made Kakashi shiver. He'd been on the receiving end of that smirk more often than not with Minato. You have something dangerous planned, don't you? He asked. Kushina was about to speak before Tsunade interrupted. Yeah, well, that's gonna have to wait. I want to know what this plan of yours is before I bring it before the rest of the cage. I also haven't cleared you from the hospital yet. Technically, I haven't cleared Naruto either, but I doubt I'll be able to go out into the blizzard and track him down to tell him that. Besides, we nearly lost you a handful of times, Kushina. We can't afford to lose you now, Tsunade advised. Oh come on, look at her. She looks even healthier than we do. What could be wrong with her? Tayuya argued. I'll be sure to take your question and expertise under consideration when you've obtained your medic license. Now please, I'll give you all some time, but Kushina will be going back to her bed. And don't try to sneak out. The staff have gotten used to a few of you doing that, namely the brat, Tsunade said, glaring at Tayuya and Fuka. Neither seemed sheepish nor guilty about their actions. In fact, the two smiled at each other. Your beds aren't good for my hair, Fuka replied. I've been poked enough when I was under Orochimaru. I don't need more than necessary from those shitheads, Tayuya fired back. Tsunade sighed. Well, I suggest you both get used to it because you'll find that we can be resilient, she returned before she walked down the hallway. The others watched her leave before turning back to Kushina. So, you do feel fine? Riza asked. Yup, I feel amazing. You'd almost think I hadn't been in a fight with a god at all. However, I meant what I said. While Yuri's training is important, it's not good to put all the pressure on her and the Hachibi Jinchuriki. While unconscious, I had Sasori, Deidara, and Asuma merge with me. I got to see their memories of the encounter. I agree that making Yuri stronger is a good thing, but we need to start strengthening the thousands of others in the village, Kushina replied. No offense, Kushina, but that's what we were doing already. Not many shinobi get the chance to fight a biju. It's also been hard because many people have traumatic experiences with them. Everyone knows it's necessary to improve, but that's easier said than done, Yugao returned. Kushina closed her eyes and exhaled. I definitely agree, but even I know we're not gonna be able to stay here forever. We're going to have to return to Jashin eventually, and there'll be nowhere to run if we don't face him. As we've seen, he liked to toy with us. He could have killed us all instantly if he really wanted to. We're just entertainment to him. If we bore him by not being prepared, no one's gonna have the time to be traumatic over anything. Besides, as I'm starting to understand, there are more powerful forces out there aside from the Biju. In fact, some of them have been around longer than the Sage of Six Paths, Kushina revealed. Tayuya snorted. Why am I not even fucking surprised? So you're planning to pit us against these guys? How do you know they won't kill us like that bastard did? The redhead asked, which made Kushina smile. Don't worry. I can't leave my son to improve alone. As I said, I've been doing my own training. As they are a part of Sochi's domain, I have a limited amount of authority over them, but even I admit that they are very formidable. Stronger than almost any shinobi, and it seems our history with them is much deeper than even we'll ever know, Kushina explained. What do you mean? Makoto asked. Kushina sighed. Turns out, we owe our very existence to them. The Otsutsuki clan, the very first race to use chakra, she uttered, making the hallway go quiet. Naruto scowled as he climbed, grabbing hold of the edge of a cliff. He shivered in pain. Frostbite had set in over an hour ago. Snow and frost covered the top of his head. He'd long since given up dusting it off. It also seemed like the ice was starting to settle into his bones. Panting from the thin air, he tried to keep his focus. Yet, it was hard. It was so hard. He pulled himself up as the ice and hail continued to fall. Vicious streaks of thunder ran through the sky as Naruto's eyes gazed up at the clouds and the rest of the mountain that seemed so far out of his reach. Why is it so damn high? He questioned before he dug his foot into a crevice and lifted himself up again. He grabbed a ledge, cursing when it cracked. Swiftly jumping to the side, Naruto barely managed to get away when the side of the mountain crumbled in a violent shaking of rock and snow. He braced himself as the minor avalanche thundered back to the ground. He was so far up he couldn't even see the bottom. That'd be a long way down if he fell. He looked back up and kept climbing. You know, when you think about it, this is all your fault. The blonde stilled as a voice echoed throughout the very recesses of his mind. It seemed no different from the harsh wind surrounding him. No one should be around to hear his thoughts aside from the Kyuubi and Morio. Kyuubi, Morio, was that you? Naruto questioned. Was what us, brat? Quit being weird and focus on your task. Kurama urged impatiently. Naruto wondered if maybe he'd interrupted something between the two before all seemed quiet again. The only thing that was around him was ice, snow, and more ice. The winds cruelly howled while Naruto tried to find the source of the noise that interrupted him. Finding nothing, he continued to climb. Everything hurt. It took everything he had just to keep the feeling in his fingers. Nevertheless, he steeled his resolve and continued upward. After some time, Naruto swerved his body to hook his foot on a steep corner of the mountain. Nearly falling off, he groaned as his muscles burned. He pulled himself up, hoisting over the ridge and falling into a blanket of snow on the side of the cliff. Naruto coughed. His vision was hazy. The hours seemed to go by either maddeningly slow or maddeningly fast. Yet, nothing seemed slow or fast about the pain. There was just so much pain. He looked at his fingers. His nails were bleeding and his fingertips were red. The cold was just so fierce and the air was so thin. It felt like his lungs were going to explode. And just imagine, you could have been with your mother and father in paradise had you not been so stubborn. No, instead you had to drag your mother out of paradise and bring her back to this suffering. Who knew Uzumaki Naruto was so selfish? Then you had the nerve to claim you love her, yet you draw them all into your selfishness and the result lays before you. They all suffer endlessly as you ask more and more of them. You'll be willing to drag everyone down until they're just as miserable as you are, won't you? Even the dead can't rest when you're alive. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki turned over painfully. He still had no idea where the voice came from, but he could do nothing to tune it out. Between everything, he thought he might be going insane after all. I promised that I wasn't gonna die until I became Hokage. I promised I'd bring Sasuke back. All my life I've dealt with fucking broken promises. What will it make me if I do the same thing? I wanted to do good. Naruto exclaimed as he turned over, resorting to crawling from the pain. And how would you know what good is? You are a shinobi. Your life is stained with blood and the deaths of others. What know you of anything good? What was it you wished to be, a hero? If you wished to be a true hero, you wouldn't have come back. Rest from your worries forever. That shall be the most heroic thing you've done since you've been born. Naruto clenched his fists and stood up. Exhausted, he couldn't even sweat. It would already be frozen before it could even fall down the side of his face. He looked up and he spotted what looked like a cavern of sorts embedded into the thighs of the mountain. He was so cold. He was also so tired. He really wanted to go to sleep. That'd be nice right now. He didn't know when he'd actually taken the time to rest since he'd begun this ridiculous journey. Yet, Naruto found himself grabbing another icy cold piece of rock, lifting himself up, and traveling higher to make it to that place of rest. The struggle was hard and his breathing was harder. At least 3 different times, he slid back down, gritting his teeth in anger and frustration as his body continued absorbing the pain put on it. After what seemed like an additional hour of pure suffering, Naruto grabbed the cave ledge. The ice storm was getting stronger and the winds were starting to howl dangerous. Lightning crashed in the distance, destroying the pillars of other mountain tops. Avalanches like the noise of 1,000 jutsu being fired at once came down with a vengeance. Once everything settled, Naruto noticed a hand reaching out to him, hoping to pull him up. Even with blurred vision, it didn't take him long to realize who was trying to aid him. He lifted up his eyes and looked at Pakura. As always, she looked at him with neither a smile nor a frown. There was neither guilt nor innocence in her eyes. She just looked at him. Suddenly, the cold seemed so far away. Naruto looked at her. He then looked at her outstretched hand. The frown on his face swiftly merged into a harsh scowl. Yet, the cold soon returned and the scowl went away as quickly as it had appeared. Finally, Naruto pulled himself up with his strength. He then walked past Pakura, sparing her no glance or attention just as she'd done to him. Instead, he walked away from the cavern and grabbed the cold mountain, continuing his climb. As for Pakura, she stood up and watched him go. Had Naruto turned around, he might have seen great frustration and guilt plastered on the face of the woman he'd considered like family. As for Naruto, he hoped there would be another cave to rest in. He'd have to climb fast before the storm got any harder and before he passed out from the thick air. One cave already seemed to have one occupant too many. Chapter 77. Quote, "Being strong is having the wisdom when it is necessary. Being strong is to being gentle when it is most needed. Being strong is using flexibility when it is required. Being strong is about being there when it is a must for you to be there. Being strong is not really about being strong," by Samae Elsade. How's this? Fine. And this? Fine. And this? Quote. Fine. Kushina, Tsunade said as she looked up at the redhead who continued to look out the window. The Hokage had been checking the Hinokan leader's joints and pressure points. Throughout the whole process, Kushina had only given her one-word answers. It became quite clear that there wasn't going to be much to say between the both of them. Kushina was being as respectful as she could to the Hokage while making sure nothing beyond that seeped through. "Are we finished now?" Kushina questioned, not bothering to look at her leader. "Well, as your doctor, I'll have the final say on if you're ready to be discharged or not. Just be patient," Tsunade replied while she continued to feel around Kushina's knees, legs, arms, and shoulders. "I've been in here for 3 days already, Tsunade. The longer you restrict me, the higher our chances of getting killed by Jashin are when we go back. I don't know who you think my son is, but I'm not going to put all the pressure and responsibility on him to fix our mess," Kushina said. Tsunade glanced up at her. She questioned. "This broken system. This life of shinobi. Killing each other over and over like animals. Maybe that's wrong. I think we treat animals better than we treat each other. When did we become so intolerant of others that we share this world with? Now we have to rely on my son to fix it. My son whose dream you crushed," Kushina said while Tsunade stopped her checkup.